So now we're finally here. Anything you want to kick off the show with today, Thorin?
Just loads of stuff. Like, you know what? Here's one for you. You know, I might start my own show when banter goes wrong. Obviously, because the joke is I could just be on it myself half the time, fucking double dip, right? But no, obviously I would do it to make fun of how stupid people are in esports. Because if anyone doesn't know, right, there's a situation that happened. It was about 2.5 years ago now, because it was at the end of 2017, where famously a player for Immortals, the CSGO team, a Brazilian player called KNG, who now actually plays for MIBR, said basically, like, prove it or I'll kill you, right? And even though he didn't actually mean it as a death threat, he just sort of meant like a very extreme way of saying, like, you know, back up what you're saying, basically. Because he was someone who later had an incident where basically it was implied he might want to beat someone up, this joke was a very hot button joke to make. And unfortunately, the Immortals social media guy, who is actually the guy who works for Cloud9 now as their social media guy, said the same joke, I think maybe within a week of this incident happening. Like, used the Immortals account itself that had just obviously like suspended KNG and said, like, prove it or I'll kill you or something, right? Which I understand actually why someone would consider that on the line, right? But the point I'm making here is Immortals used to have a pretty edgy person who was trying to be quite innovative with their social media, but they fired him because of this, right? It's actually where another meme came from, which was the meme that was like, you know, this person's been removed, they're no longer associated with Immortals. Whatever the phrasing is, you've all seen that tweet a million times. Everyone's memed it, usually as a joke, right? So what people don't know is Jack from Cloud9 saw this and actually said, like, get me that guy, and hired him. This is a guy called Portillo who now works for Cloud9. Now, the reason why this is relevant, right, is because last week, about a week and a half ago, maybe, we had a scenario where when the Immortals and Golden Guardians lineups were known, Jack from Cloud9, one of the owners of Cloud9, said, like, you know, something along the lines of, like, looking forwards to Golden Guardians and Immortals, like, battling for 10th place or something, right? Fairly low-key banter. It's not really that harsh, is it, you know? Like, Immortals has a pretty whack. Obviously, didn't make the playoffs, and Golden Guardians barely made the playoffs, but have made some interesting player changes. So anyway, when he makes this tweet, the Immortals Twitter account, whoever the new person is, thinks, I'll get involved in the old Twitter banter. People love back and forth between orgs. And came in with what I think is actually some of the shittest banter I have ever seen in the history of esports. So here's what their reply was. I'll find it for you right now, because it was actually unbelievable how bad it was. Wait there. So here we go. So here's what Jack's actual tweet said. It said, it might be tight race for 10th between GG and Immortals. The Immortals guy comes back and says, good luck in your race to embarrass NA at Worlds this year, hearts. Now, the reason why that is absolute dog shit banter is because, first of all, it's not funny. Secondly, it doesn't even have any basis to it. Like, Cloud9 is far and away the North American organization that has most proudly represented the NA region.
They're the only one ever to make a semi.
All the time, when the real number ones would always fail. Meanwhile, Immortals has done fucking nothing ever. 0 LCS championships. They've only made one final, and that wasn't even with the most dominant lineup. And you know what? They made it to a Worlds once and fucking embarrassed themselves completely in a group containing a Fnatic that Reckless was about ready to cry himself home on a magic carpet. And damn, Gigabyte Marines was the other team. These are the teams you had to beat to make the playoffs. So this banter was just like a perfect storm of the worst intentions and banter I think I've ever seen. It was unbelievable how bad. And as I say, quite fitting with what I said before, that they used to actually have a pretty good social media guy. And now, as far as I can tell, it's like they're just letting some boomer have a go now. I don't even know what's going on. Did he say that?
So the best part about that too was when Mateus, the social media manager, when he posted on the Immortals account, he didn't even say "kill you." I believe I think he just said "prove it," or like, just because it was. I don't even think he went that far.
It's implied, sure.
Right, but the point is like it wasn't even that bad, and you know, hilariously though, is that KNG, that player, is now literally playing for MIBR, that same organization that he was fired from that tweet now.
Because they own, yes, Immortals owns MIBR, people don't know. Yeah.
So it wasn't even like a lifetime ban from playing for the team. And he's been playing very well recently by that team's standards.
But here's the thing. This does segue though into a more relevant thing, because that was like a week and a half ago, but we never brought it up on the show. What it segues into is this. Speaking of shit memes that aren't even funny and have no basis to them, how about the LCS broadcast?
I knew this was coming.
That's unbelievable. Monty, I thought people were exaggerating, because I don't watch the pre-game stuff normally. I just watch the matches. I usually watch them as VODs. I actually thought people were trolling when they said how bad this was. Like, you can't, if you haven't seen this, by the way, in case you only watched the games that you tuned in Friday or TSM game or something, go back and watch the pre-game of LCS. And the two segments I want you to watch is this guy called Sushi Dragon doing some shit dance with the worst like tech possible, and literally champions dancing behind him at the same move. It's the worst thing I've ever seen.
Okay.
It's like some hellscape.
I know.
Thing they did one of those like expos or something where they're trying to get you all the crowd into something and give away like a game or something. And then the other thing is this fucking freestyle rap that Latigris did, which was also just absolute ass cheeks. Like, just didn't fit at all. So anyway, come on.
All right. So first off, I actually really like Sushi Dragon, and he actually probably... So he's a streamer who does that dancing stuff, but he's actually incredibly funny.
Is he like a professional dancer or something?
No. Well, I mean, yes, because in the way that he does that for money, but not in the way that...
Right, okay.
He's
is it supposed to be cringe like when he does it on his...
Yes,
stream?
100%.
Right, okay.
So that's the entire point of it. And let's just say, like, I love Sushi Dragon because he actually has one of the most technically advanced setups on Twitch. He actually, like, pushes a lot of, like, the OBS tech to the limits. He's incredibly creative. Let's just say...
Looking forward to a Super Bowl halftime show.
Well, who knows what the future has. It's supposed to be scuffed, though. That's the whole thing. Right. Is that it's?
I don't see that. I just thought it was rubbish.
Yes. So let's just say I enjoy Sushi Dragon if I have had some, adult substances that are legal in the state of California, and I just want to laugh for a bit and enjoy kind of all the effects. And like, what's pretty amazing about his stream is the way that he keeps layering more and more effects on top of it. So it's a pretty fresh experience. So I actually love Sushi Dragon. So that said, this was not the time nor the place for Sushi Dragon. Sushi Dragon was there because he was closing out the LCS when everybody was at home for quarantine. They did like a post finals dance party with him, which makes sense.
Right.
That made sense to me. Inserting him into the broadcast randomly doesn't make sense in the pre-show. So, and besides, how is he supposed to turn that down, right? He had full control over those slots that he was given, basically. So it's a huge advertisement for his stream, whether you liked it or not. Some people probably liked it and tuned in at least to him later on. So I understand why he did it. Now, what I don't understand is why we've been sitting here for 2 months, and this is the game plan that LCS came with out of the gate. Right.
I bet I can speculate. Do you know what the speculation is?
What?
Right, because here's the thing I was going to make the point of that's so jarring about that, and then the weird rap that just had no flow to it and was just about trying to get big words fitted as quickly as possible into a segment that didn't rhyme and had no flow. What made no sense is this, Monty. The number one thing that people would normally say, like when Papa Smithy was on the show not that long ago about LCS, is like they normally don't put as much effort into the lo-fi stuff because they want it to look really high production value. Yes. I've always understood that. They think they're the NFL on Sunday, right? Here's what makes no sense. Going years without ever letting people properly banter on desks, do fun segments, and then out of nowhere, going so hard 180 the other direction to where you look like an actual joke with what you do. Yes. That sounds to me like exactly what I've heard is the Riot mentality for years, where the old joke was that in the early days of LCS, when they were all sat around whatever boardroom table talking to like the main people, the joke was whoever could awkwardly crowbar their idea into being like the NFL was the guy who was going to get picked, because whoever was the like little Lord Fauntleroy character picking people was just going, football, he's a thinker. I like this guy. And so the equivalent of that, right, is when they're sat around the boardroom now going, sir, LEC numbers are breaking records again. We're far behind. He goes, what is it they like about this LEC? And they go, well, sir, there's a lot of youthful energy and memes. And he goes, but bring me these memes. Bring me memes.
And then they're like,
I give them memes. And this is their version of fun content.
But if you're going to do that, wouldn't the person you want most on your broadcast be Avali? right? She was the one making all the fun lo-fi content. So like what's so baffling to me about this is that if they're going to go this direction, they got rid of the person who is most capable of delivering this kind of content, except in a better way. The other thing that really like tilted me about that, the whole broadcast was like, I felt like I was getting whiplash, and it's just because of the broadcast flow. So first off, what I didn't understand is that when Riot was talking about their donations and matching donations to, I don't know which organization, I believe Black Lives Matter, or one of those nonprofits. What they did was they had Latigris, and then they had Dash read the copy on that, which to me is super weird because sure, you know, they're there on the broadcast, but that should be the commissioner or a Riot executive talking about company policy. And also just from a tonal perspective, the whiplash you receive of seeing like Dash talk about that and then immediately be like, oh, well, now I'm going to talk about the games is crazy. Like it's very difficult to like switch gears that quickly from something that's like so somber to, oh, we're just going to play some video games now. And I don't really understand why the commissioner can't come on with a pre-recorded segment and say, this is the policy of Riot or the league. Like that is their job. You shouldn't be putting talent in that scenario. I have no idea why you would do that. It's very, very weird. And then
you talk about the same company that had DJ Wheat, a person who's never worked with Riot Games and any full-time capacity, be the person to deliver the public apology for Season 2 Worlds failing. Like, this is not a company that understands the principle of having a commissioner and having them be front faces. They never understood that, as far as I can tell.
Right. And if your complaint is that some people were tweeting back at me when I tweeted that and saying, well, we know Dash. I'm like, well, you're just pointing out the failure of the LCS to make the commissioner somebody who is forward facing to the community. In fact, you used to have that when Nick Allen was the commissioner of the LCS. He was very recognizable to the fans, and somehow that's completely fallen away. But you have to put somebody who actually has executive authority within the company in that role and not throw talent in there for like every reason. It's not professional. So, and then also you create this issue where you have like this very weird tone shifting on the broadcast. And then on top of that, then you have Sushi Dragon, again, who I really like, but is not appropriate for this kind of content. And then you have, I think that the raps thing would have gone better if they were in a studio and they like cut to a pre-produced video, because some of the rap stuff they've done is with, I'm sure we'll talk to Ender about this, but with Captain Flowers and Dracos has been really fun in the past when it was pre-produced, like that 90s hip hop rap segment that they did. I enjoyed that. I thought it was creative, but.
Oh, by the way, one other thing to say as well, because as usual, everyone's a fucking pleb and I have to translate English into English for them. So if anyone didn't figure it out, because I saw everyone doing that, I don't know why, a company like Riot who fuck up at every turn, usually with malicious intent or pure incompetence, everyone stands for them every fucking time. Like, no matter what they do, until like ironclad evidence is put down, people are like, well, maybe they did it for a good reason. It wasn't ever their fault. So I saw people trying to do that with Overly's vague explanation of why she isn't on the broadcast anymore. If anyone couldn't see how incredibly contrived she had to make it while still almost doing one of those like blink twice if you're in trouble type settings, if you can't tell that clearly wasn't her choice to leave the broadcast, you are beyond help. You are absolutely beyond help. There was people thinking she voluntarily stepped down and she didn't want to do it anymore, like, or that she's doing some better job now. If you can't see from the wording, she was basically just screaming like, it's not what I want to do, but I'm trying to be what I think's professional by stepping down in a appropriate manner. Like she was trying to be an ultimate pro basically and give them an easy out. And sadly, every idiot's given them an even easier out, even though I can't understand why anyone who complains about LEC and it's like, why don't we get all the stuff they have? How could you possibly like them getting rid of Overly? She was the only thing that brought that to the LCS broadcast, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I thought the content she was making, even on her own or with Team Liquid and everything, was, again, we've talked about this last week. It's not always my cup of tea, but I understand that a lot of fans like it. And so she has value, whether or not I personally enjoy everything that she created. She was good at doing what she did, period. So I think it's very weird. I mean, the other thing that was super weird, I might just do a like production review on my stream later this week to like go through all of this stuff and like talk about specifically why you would not build around a show like this or why you would not make these decisions. Is that, so here's the thing about the whole coronavirus situation. Now, to be clear, it is increasing in Los Angeles, so I understand the precaution that they're taking. But at the same time, if your talent is just going to the studio and is otherwise staying at home, and Riot is saying, okay, for the spring split, what we need is our casters in the studio, not the team. So doing what LEC does with appropriate cleaning, social distancing, and we're going to say, okay, we will pay for any delivery fees of groceries or food to your houses. Then there's not very much risk as long as there's a minimal production crew and they're separated from the casters. And even many of the producers can still produce from home like they're doing right now. So there's not really a functional reason. Like we did this at Flashpoint during the pandemic. There's not a legal reason. In Los Angeles right now, even gyms are open. Now, do I think that's a great idea? Probably not. But I do think that it's very possible to have the LCS in studio right now, even if you believe that it's a very serious situation with the cases increasing. There are certain ways you could go about doing it properly to get them in studio. That's what I don't understand about what's going on right now. So
there's one thing, by the way. Do you know if Ender actually watched LCS?
Yeah, I did. I talked to him about some of the.
Right, okay.
I told him to watch some Cloud9 and some Team Liquid TSM stuff. Enough. So we'll talk about the big games that happened this weekend. It was going to be hard because it was an LEC Super Week. So the reason why we're focusing mostly on LEC is because there were 15 games this weekend. So there's like a ton to talk about, especially about the European teams. And next week, we're going to have Solo on the show and maybe another guest to talk more about LCS. So that's kind of the game plan here. But yeah, in general, like we did this last week too, where we like complained about the LCS production, but I don't even know what to say at this point. I don't understand what the game plan is. If you're going to put Sushi Dragon on the broadcast, you have to let him do the entire broadcast. Like you have to let the entire broadcast be in that style. And would it be weird to have like guest creative directors who are doing that on LCS? Sure, it would be weird, but at least it would be a comprehensive creative approach rather than just kind of putting his stream in the broadcast. I mean, if you're going to put somebody's stream in the broadcast, why not do it with one of your co-streamers or invite them onto the broadcast to do the pre-show? Like, why can't you get LS and I Will Dominate on your pre-show? That seems like a compelling pre-show to me. And it actually makes sense for the esport. I don't know. I don't know. You have any other final words on this topic before we bring our guests on?
No, I think we can go. I mean, I guess we can talk about with Ender about the Super Week concept and stuff. So just bring the guests on, I think.
All right. Then we are going to take a quick break, guys, get all our guests set up, and we'll be back in just a couple. All right, here we go with my super scuffed overlay. So when I was setting up today, I realized that when I was looking at our old assets for Summoning Insight, that we actually didn't have a 4-person overlay because we had never done 4-person shows before we went into the studio. So I will get that fixed. But in the meantime, you can look at this garbage and enjoy it. Production quality, still top quality. But as you can see, it is actually sort of creatively, it has a unified sort of aesthetic and feel and tone to
CS broadcast for this week. I'm going to start dancing in a minute and then Monty's going to rap. No, actually, if people don't know, there's actually a very good reason why we never used to have more than 3 people on the show, which is back in the day, people used to be terrible at doing talk shows back then. So I had to talk half the time anyway, just to get people to talk. And then Monty obviously was like, that was when he was in his absolute prime as like the god of knowledge from Korea. So he had to talk like half the time as well. And then we let the guests talk 10% of the time. So there was no space. There was no extra 10% left for that 4th person, Monty.
It was also incredibly difficult because I was in Korea and you were in Europe. So basically if we had an NA guest, we'd be in 3 time zones. So scheduling that was really hard. But it's less hard now that we're all forced to be in North America and Europe, and we can do it at a good time for everybody. So with that said, again, like I said, unified sort of aesthetic here. It might be slightly scuffed, but everything's slightly scuffed on the webcams, which means that we still have better creative direction than the LCS overall. So it's all right, Ender. Don't say anything. Just shh. You're doing great. You're doing great, buddy.
Thank you, Monty. I really appreciate that.
Exactly. They can still send you back. So they can still send you back.
That's right. You could still be punished by returning you to the LCS. You know, I hear they're a little bit light on color commentators after Jat left. So when can we expect your transfer?
I don't know, you know, maybe they give me a call in the offseason. We'll see.
That's right. The analyst nightmare going to LCS. All right. Also with us is Kaas, also known as just Kaas now, former support professional player, now assistant coach for Mad Lions, whom I was really excited about getting on the show because of all the cool shit that Mad Lions did this week. So congrats on your 2-1 record, losing to G2. But that was your least cool draft, so I'll forgive it.
Yeah, it was a bit unfortunate. I think we fucked up in the draft a bit. We didn't know about the Mordekaiser, and like we can leave Varus open, but I guess G2 knew how to play it, and Perks is pretty well on the champ, so they punished it, and they got it snowballing.
I do think you learned from that though, because didn't you pick the Wukong after the Mordekaiser was selected?
No, we picked Wukong before Mordekaiser.
Wukong first, and you weren't gonna flex it into support without Senna being there, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, makes sense.
That would be a bit awkward.
It would be very difficult.
Who farms?
The one thing I actually want to ask you about that, because when I watched this game, right, the way I always try to watch League of Legends is basically, I've told people the story before, it's back when Monty used to do the Korean LCK games, when it wasn't LCK, it was OG and Champions. What he would always do famously in his casting style was say the win conditions of each of the comps before the game begins. So when I watched this game, even with whatever happened in the draft, I was thinking, right, well, obviously the job of Mad Lions, everyone in Mad Lions should have this in the back of their brain, is every team fight, we have to kill them as fast as possible. But instead, every team fight, they were doing that shit where you back out again and you let it become an extended team fight. And Varus was just sitting on the back, just going, oh, this is brilliant. It's another one and another one. Like, I don't know how your team thought they were going to win this game. It was bizarre to me.
I mean, but Varus couldn't really hit anyone. Like, basically every time Wukong jumps in.
He's focusing the fucking Mordekaiser every time. You thought, oh, wow, he's on his own 1v5. It's like, yeah, because you can't kill him. Do you know what the role of that champion is?
Yeah, that's true, but
I like to kill the squishy champions personally. They die really fast. I don't know if you guys know that. Maybe write it on like the whiteboard or something.
Hey, they figured it out against SKL, right? They
we figured out the second game.
Okay.
Yeah, because actually from watching that game and looking at the draft, I thought G2 had a really good strategy coming in, and I got like super hyped on G2 on game one. I'm like, oh my God, this looks like 2019 G2. They're like diving and zoning people off every tower and they crash the waves. They're trading objectives around like opposite sides of the map. And within team fights, like their understanding of like the threshold of range they could stand on where they can still poke and look enticing to Mad Lions without Mad Lions actually being able to reach them was really impressive. And
yeah.
I don't know what happened the rest of the weekend, but that game was really impressive.
Well,
I mean, it was a classic G2, right? Like, I think at a certain moment, at minute 20, they showed the gold, and Caps actually had the same amount of gold at Kalista. So Caps actually gave up a ton just to get like both Wonder and Perks ahead. So like, this was the low.
There was even the play, right, where the first top lane dive happened, where Caps used his teleport to get there, and then Perks just TP'd mid to like farm his like 2 waves that were crashing the tower.
Yeah, so we were actually freezing bot lane, and the wave was gonna push towards us, and they were gonna lose a shit ton because Varus still had the base. He didn't base yet, but we left the lane and Tamkench pushed it out, and that's why the lane was fine again.
I think yes, G2 beat you, but I think when we look at G2 overall, obviously you have to take into consideration that they did have rather they had some pretty poor circumstances this week. Obviously, Perks' father passed away and he wasn't able to practice, so this is a team that probably isn't the most prepared for the meta right now. Now, with that in mind, I was super confused by some of G2's drafts later, because if there are these extenuating circumstances, I don't think, and Perks is swapping back to the AD carry role, I don't think I would have drafted what they did against Vitality, which is a entirely Perks-centric Aphelios composition where he is the overwhelming main source of damage with Tamkench and Galio, Lee Sin, and Ornn. So if your player who hasn't been able to practice is obviously under a significant amount of emotional strain, and is role swapping back, I would not draft that composition, is what I'm going to say.
I think the comp could work, but like the problem was like Caps likes to push mid and roam to a side, right? That we know about. The problem is they leave Thresh open and Kalista open, and Thresh Kalista have like huge kill pressure on Varus Tamkench, so you just don't push them in like easily, right? So like whenever Caps push mid, they went top lane and tried to dive the Sion, who's really good, like in stopping dives. So they didn't got it rolling, and then you're stuck with like 3 tanks, Ornn, Galio, and Tamkench. And it's really hard to get back in the game because you can't make the easy pickoffs that they are used to have.
Look, I'm not saying the comp is bad. I don't think it's bad. I'm saying it's bad when G2 is using it this week for a variety of reasons that are exterior to the game. That would be my argument, is maybe this isn't the week for that style of composition. Maybe you try and put some of the burden on some other players, which I do think that we saw in your game. Obviously, Wunder had a really strong game on Mordekaiser, for example.
Yeah, but against Vitality, were they blue side or red side?
They're blue side.
Yeah, so they have to blind pick top lane, right? So that's always a bit harder then.
Yeah. I think like it's hard to know like exactly what was like going on in the camp over there. I also just like when you look at how the bot lane played overall, it was just not up to par with what I expect from Perkz and Mickey. Like, yes, Kalista Thresh, obviously like very strong kill lane, but if you look at Mickey's play between levels 1 and 2 inside the lane, like Thresh misses one play and then he walks like halfway down the lane, misses a Q on the Tahm Kench, and then Mickey just realizes, wait a second, now this Thresh is level 2 and now I have to flash and like I'm 1 HP, like I almost die. And there were multiple instances throughout that game where Perkz and Mickey were sort of overreaching in bottom lane, which I don't feel like I used to see from them back when they were playing at the peak.
I mean, they only recently swapped, right? So like you only have a certain amount of time to play all these different matchups, and right now there's a lot of different matchups, and I guess they're not practiced enough.
Yeah, I'm like, I can excuse Perkz for that, but like just it was some pretty basic like mistakes that I saw from Mickey that I need to see him improve on.
So I do want to dive into Mad Lions though, because G2 I just consider kind of a wash this week. I assume they're going to get back into form eventually. They could have easily gone 0-3 if they hadn't beaten you guys, unfortunately for you, but the rest of your games are really strong. And one of the things that I think is super interesting is that you guys came into this super week and you were on red side all 3 games. So in a way, it was kind of a gift for the way that you were strategically drafting throughout all of your matches to have the same.
How was that decided, by the way?
So basically, there's like 2 splits, right? So like the first split, I think like the one team has side selection, and the second split, the other team has side selection. So this week we had side selection against G2, and XL and SK had it against us.
Right. Okay. So it's just coincidence then, right?
I think we were the only team and origin to choose red side on day 1, and I think all the rest of the teams took blue side the rest of the days.
What's the reason for that, do you think?
I mean, basically on blue side you can determine how the draft goes, right? You can like ban the bot lane matchups, and you can take the AD carry that's left, and you have the preferable bot lane matchup.
Yeah, but what you guys did was clever, is that, yes, in a way, blue side can determine the draft, but you made their selection for them, effectively. You said, I mean, all of you guys will pick Varus first because of the strength right now, and then we are going to use that first pick Varus to come back at you with some wacky anti-Varus compositions that will make it impossible for Varus to do his job, which I mean, I loved. Yeah.
Exactly, right? It's easy to expect. It's not easy to expect the unexpected, right? So we basically give them Varus, like, you can take it or we take it. We take it with pleasure as well, you know? Like, sure, give it to us, and we will show you how to play it. But if you take it, sure, we can also show you how to punish it.
So in this scenario, what I really enjoyed about your game versus XL was obviously the Hecarim last pick, which is hilarious. Also, a surprisingly good matchup into Vladimir, considering that the pool really, you could just run around on the side of the pool while he's pooled and then continue to attack him afterwards. It reminds me a lot of how the Volibear matchup used to work into Vladimir back in the day, which was like very, very hard for Vladimir to deal with in lane because there wasn't a very good way for him to escape. And also, I think the Hecarim changes overall are combined with the teleport changes, was that part of the consideration as well, considering that, you know, he was buffed, and then also you do have the speed off of the teleport now for some of these flanks?
I mean, we had a good matchup, so Hecarim into Vladimir is obviously good. I don't think you can blind pick a top laner like that on blue side, especially. Like, if your top laner has hands and he can counter pick, then it's always a win, right? We already had Yuumi.
You think they did that disrespectfully in that sense because Kryze is like carry top lane, so he probably thought he was just going to destroy Aroma? Do you think that's part of why?
I mean, I think he just wanted to pick comfort because it's one of his first matches. Okay. And they were expecting maybe Aroma to play a tank, you know, but we've been practicing a lot of other stuff, so like, let's go. And we already had Yuumi, so I mean, it was an easy choice, Hecarim and Yuumi. It's a fun duo.
And Orianna, you have that speed too.
Yeah. I thought it was really important too when you see, like, it's literally the same mid ADC combo they saw against G2 that beat them by never allowing you guys like take a fight into them, right? With like the poke of Zoe and Varus. So having the Hecarim that can just go unstoppable and completely ignore those guys flying in seemed like a really almost obvious answer. Like, obviously no one was expecting a Hecarim, but you needed something like that after you've taken Yuumi support and Lee Sin jungle, which don't give you like the super hard engage options.
I mean, it's not the super hard engage options, but like Shadow always knows to find the kicks somehow.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know how, but he does it, but he always finds the kicks, and yeah.
You know what was funny about this game is Shadow played so well, and this synergy with the Orianna ball and the Yuumi was so good that the Hecarim kind of wasn't even necessary. Like, you could see how it would work, but a lot of the time, I mean, Orome did well in lane, and I think was playing smart, especially in the early game. And I do want to talk about the early game in a minute, but what I loved is that Shadow was doing so well flanking behind the Varus that, you know, the Hecarim ult in those team fights was for the most part unnecessary because the Varus was already dead every time before it happened. It felt more like insurance than anything else. I
mean, as long as you keep Hecarim ulti, Varus always has to keep in his head that he has to take it in consideration that the Hecarim ulti is there, right? So he won't do damage on 100%. He might do on 75 because he has to like stay distance, stuff like this. But I mean, our goal is just to overrun Varus with engage, and like if you can survive one, then sure, then we throw the second one, and we go throw the third one, and let's see if you can dance.
I love it. I really enjoyed this. I got very perverse pleasure out of all your comps this weekend.
I mean, we like to entertain, right? League of Legends is still for entertaining business, and all the Yuumi, Lulu, and stuff like this is getting a bit, yeah.
Should we talk about the best game of the entire Super Week, Misfits versus Fnatic? Because here's what's perfect, Monty, is in the actual broadcast itself, there is literally a moment where Ender is asked, when there's an in-hib open for the Fnatic team, he's asked, what are the chances? He put on the spot, what are the chances of the Fnatic comeback, right? And he actually, fair play, puts it much higher than most people probably would. He said it was like 25% chance. But like, what's hilarious is, after that, more stuff happens that makes it even less likely they should have come back. Like, this is one of the most ridiculous games I've ever seen, like, thrown ever in the... Not least because I almost, like, get why it was thrown, because Razork, right up until that point, was godlike. He was so good on the set. He was getting so many... But then it's like playing solo queue. You go for just you've killed him too many times. You think you can't be killed, and he was just going for everything after that.
Yeah, he tried to like suplex, I think, Whipple underneath the mid lane tower while the rest of his team
no
like,
follow-up, yeah.
And they're like, wait, I guess our Baron's over now. Like we can't really push in, and that in the moment, it didn't feel like that was going to like swing the game.
Yeah, sure.
All it ended up doing was stalling it out to the next Baron. But the fact that they had to go to the next Baron and then they 50-50'd it on top of that, and fair play, they have a Callista.
Yeah, I was going to say, it wasn't
like,
a 50-50. They just fucked it up.
Yeah. But it's like,
don't abuse the term 50-50 like that. It wasn't. It was like an 80-20 at least.
Sure.
But
yeah.
Yes, that was a titanic error.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really scary as well.
Yeah, go.
It's really scary as well to go 50-50 against like a Shogat, right? Like, why? You can end the game without the Nashor. You don't have to do this, you know?
and yet it was Ezreal that got it somehow.
That's why it was so
it wasn't
funny.
even self-made W. Rex was just like, WQ? Oh, thanks.
That's right. Like I very rarely ever say throw, but like this was like, as you said, Darren, it's not like it was even that one death that cost it. It was just a comedy of errors. They did like everything wrong from that stage onwards. It was like 10 things in a row. Like if I'm Fnatic, I would just be like, thanks for the game, I guess. I don't know how I didn't even know how to win the game myself, but you found a way for me.
Yeah, and the really tragic thing was that like Fnatic's comp actually had a lot of really good scaling options. So after that Baron play, it was just like, wait a second, now Fnatic auto win? Like I don't know. Like when Misfits were sieging, like Feb and Zoe was so on point that the game looked unplayable for Fnatic. Like there was nothing they could do until Fnatic just threw themselves, or Misfits rather, threw themselves under the turret and like inted away the kills. But once it's like a fair fight in the river, Zoe can't do anything. Kalista can't do anything against a Cho'Gath. Like it's just not fun.
Because the thing is, considering overall, obviously Misfits, like, I mean, only won one game this week. They obviously lost the game to Rogue as well. What do you actually think of the new Misfits lineup? Like I said, like Razork looked great again. Cobby looked pretty good up until that point in the game. The DOS one's an interesting move because I didn't see any problems with Denick, but fair enough. Maybe they wanted a different bot lane and he's duo queued with them or something. If people remember, he played for Misfits like 2 games last year when they were just throwing everything at the wall at the end of the summer split. So what do you think of the new Misfits lineup? Because it seems weird when a team won one game, but I feel like there aren't moral victories, but like you basically won that first game. So like I feel like it actually has promise as a lineup, even though it's got a terrible record at the moment. I think
like, well, it's only 1 and 2, right? And they did beat Origin, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, looking just incredibly sad in this meta, I would say. But you know, the Rogue was expected to maybe challenge for a top 4 spot if we're to believe people from, you know, the conversations we had on the show last week with a bunch of the analysts over in the LEC region. But I mean, I do think that this is an easy 2-1 week for Misfits Gaming. And so I wouldn't read too terribly much into this. Like I look at the kind of mistakes that they were making in the late game, and these are the mistakes that I think are pretty easy to correct. Like you're not going to continue making mistakes like this if you're a team.
Yeah, and I also think like the one game, or not the one game that they deserved to lose, it was just like hilariously bad performance by Razork and DOS. Like I actually think their mental just imploded. Like DOS got first blooded, I think, and then Razork tried to force this mid lane dive when his mid laner had no mana, and then for the rest of the game they were just constantly getting hooked and died. So it was less of a team play thing and more like, wait a second, guys, you know this is like LEC, right? Not like a scrim or something, and you guys just need to reset the mental. Because like the Fnatic game, I thought the majority of it was quite good. The Origin game, I did critique them on some of the movements they made, especially around the 10-minute Herald swap. But these are, again, things that a team that has now subbed in like a new bottom lane for this entire split is going to be able to work on and improve in the next few weeks.
Because the actual competitiveness of the league, this split looks crazy.
Looks great.
Yeah. I mean, I think the early weeks, I don't want to jump to conclusions because at the end of the day, I'm still like, well, I still expect G2 Fnatic to be at the top of the league. And I definitely think, you know, some of our top teams have been underperforming. But I think the lower tier teams like the SK and Vitality sort of surge here is fantastic to see because they were just like endless voids of despair last bit. Like when you saw a game, you had to cast a game, you're like, what do I say about this team? I don't know. Like I hope I don't cry. And this split with the changes they made, they look so much better.
What are your thoughts on Misfits, Kaas?
I find it, first of all, weird that you dropped Denick after one split. I don't understand this. Like, okay, like, I mean, Denick is basically a rookie, right? The team he was on before were like, it was not LEC. So if you take a rookie, like you want to give him the time to develop as well, right? Like before you hire him, you do good research and you see if he's like coachable and stuff like this. So, I mean, like DOS is obviously doing good in solo queue. He has like 4 accounts in top 10. But why this change, you know? Like, I don't see the problem. Like Denick was also performing well last split.
Despite the fact he had a bot lane he can't even communicate with. So I think he was doing pretty well under the circumstances.
Well, that's an opinion, but I mean, I think it's better to have non-Koreans as well. Like, I think like it's hard to communicate with Koreans, like in general, to feel with them, and like like to team bond with them, obviously. But Fabyfan was doing really good. Razok was doing really good. And I think like in the Fnatic game, they did really good until a certain moment, right? Like it stays Fnatic. And like you can't, if you fuck up once against Fnatic, then they'll take you.
Yeah, so here's my opinion on Denick versus DOS, because I think a lot of people were very quick to jump on the DOS flame, especially after I think it was the game against SK, I want to say, where things looked quite bad for him, and he was like just constantly dying. But I actually don't think this is like a slight at Denick's play in Spring, because I think Denick was pretty solid overall in Spring. This is just, hey, they brought in Kabe, one of the better ADCs in the league. It's a new ADC in the bot lane. Kabe probably got the choice as to who he wanted to play with, and based on scrims, he probably thinks that DOS is better. So this is one where I want to give it time, and if it doesn't work out over a few weeks, then maybe they change things up. But I would rather Kabe get the choice for who he wants to play with.
I thought DOS was good in that Fnatic game as well. He was landing a whole bunch of shit. He was looking pretty good.
Yeah, he looked better than Hylissang.
That's for sure. I mean, in the game against, like, when he was playing Karma into Thresh, like, I don't think this matchup is really playable for him, so, like he will die anyway. Every time the jungle is near, like, Thresh will just flash on him and he will die. Because I think they were playing Karma Ezreal into...
Aphelios Thresh.
Aphelios Thresh, so, like, you basically, with Ezreal, Karma, you want to push the lane, right? But, like, you don't want to push the lane against Thresh, so, like, what do you want to do? So, it's like... He tried to make it work, but he died twice, and then he was like playing really back. But at that point, like, I mean, they're stronger, so.
Right, when we talk then about Rogue, since obviously Rogue was one of the teams that 3-0'd, and this is a squad where it's funny how things work, because everyone who isn't like behind the scenes in Europe basically has just given up on Rogue at the end of last split, because everyone spent the whole split like they should be, this is the sophomore time now, this is when they come and challenge Ender, they're going to be up there with G2, and then because they were nowhere near that, and half of them looked like just like, oh, they never actually increased the total faith, and they just baselined, now they plateaued. Now everyone was like, right, well, who cares about Rogue? Now it's all about the other team. And then now they're actually 3-0. Now what's going on?
Well, it did play Schalke and XL. That is, I think, one of the reasons. But I guess the reason to be most excited was that the game that they played against Misfits was extremely one-sided.
I mean, the problem with that, by the way, is if we're going to use transitive logic like that, right, where Schalke and XL are bad, well, in this kind of scenario, who's good? Fnatic? Well, they should have lost to Misfits. Or Misfits, is Misfits good? No, because Rogue beat them, but that means they're not good because Misfits isn't good, and G2's lost all the games, and OG beat G2, but OG's crap. So everyone's garbage, Monty.
Yes.
Someone has to be good. On paper, Rogue actually looks like one of the better teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it seems reasonable, like I said earlier, with some of the predictions that were coming in, that they could be maybe challenged for one of the lower world seeds. I still need a little bit. I wasn't as high on Rogue. I will say that. I think I have a lot of long-term confidence in this roster, but I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, Kaas, what do you think about Rogue?
I mean, looking at their first 3 games, like the first game they played against XL, I think. I mean, Special played Yasuo and he ulted 0 times in that whole game. So it's like, you can't really go off on that game.
It wasn't just Yasuo too; it was Gragas Yasuo.
Yeah.
Gragas Yasuo. So like, there must be some moment where you can like actually, twist your arm.
They got 0 kills that entire game. They were close to get. Yeah, that one was. That one was a real head scratcher for sure.
And then the second game, I think, against Misfits, they played Aphelios Thresh into Ezreal Karma. And I think if you give Hansama a good matchup, like, they can abuse it, right? So they will look good. But the third game, I think Schalke should have won. Like, Schalke outdrafted them. They had the better bot lane matchup, the outscaling one. But, I mean, yeah, they just fucked up, I guess.
I mean, Schalke is pretty bad as well.
I mean, they didn't change a lot, right? And last split, they weren't shining that much. So I guess you can't expect them to shine either.
The problem with that team, right, is nobody can accurately analyze it because it is still like in the fucking trapped in the event horizon of Forgiven being in the lineup last split. So everyone in the world just doesn't say anything when they lose because they're like, well, I already said it was all Forgiven that was bad in the team. So now that he's gone, I have to pretend they're all right. Their team's garbage. It's like a fucking bad lineup. It's a failed lineup. Worse than a bad lineup, it's a failed lineup. Like Abadagi is nothing. He's one of the worst mid laners in Europe as far as I'm concerned. Most of the rest of the lineups, like, okay at times. Like Lurix and Inax are good in as much as like they weren't supposed to even be in LEC. So like fair enough, they're doing all right, I guess. They're better than their people they replaced. But what have they even got as a squad? Like how could this squad make playoffs?
Okay, I think you're being overly... So I would agree with your performance. I am not high on this team. But with Forgiven, I believe they won 0 games. Sure. And then they dropped him after 8 games. And then they went on to win 6 of the remaining 10. Like, that's pretty solid. And since then, they've made 1 change in the bot lane.
Okay, keep the thought going. Keep the thought going. Yeah, big prediction coming up. Come on.
No, I mean, I'm not telling you that I'm hyped on this team. Like, I don't think this is a playoffs caliber team. But to go ahead and say, like, oh, like, Forgiven wasn't, like, a huge problem on this team. Like, I don't know. Forgiven
Who said
was, like,
that?
a pretty big problem to me. I believe you did.
I'll just leave it to the fans. You can go watch it to VOD, so you can even go back and listen to what I just said. So I'll leave it to the jury on this one.
I mean,
you make your points, mate. I'll make my points. You make your points. How about that? That's the way it'll work on the show. So go ahead. Go on then. Continue the thought. So you don't think they're one of the worst teams, and you don't think you think Forgiven was the big problem apparently. So go ahead and explain why now they're actually going to do something because you said they won like 6 out of 10 of the games at the end of the split. So continue the thought. What's going to happen with them now, Ender?
So here's where my confusion lies. Is that they did actually go on quite a few, and they like surpassed like an SK and a Vitality last split. So coming into this split, like sure those teams made other changes, but we didn't really know what to expect. And we're like, hey, maybe this team, they could be like an 8th place, maybe a 7th place if they're looking good, if Nukes can impress in the bot lane. But I mean, overall, I think it's just like Oduamne on this team, and then Inax has some good days, and then I'm just left with a giant black hole. And I agree with you, they're not a good team. But to say that like there's no faith in this roster and they're looking terrible after they actually made some huge improvements last spring is too much.
Well, they did, but I think the question is when you have a region like Europe and you have the opportunity to do things like SK did and really like try and create some churn in your roster in between splits, because this is the perfect time to do it too. Remember that we had a longer off season than usual because of the pandemic. So a lot of this was already pushed back. This is the perfect time to go ahead and make some of these changes. This is a perfect time to roll the dice, which is what SK did. And I don't know. I mean, we'll talk about SK. I don't know how to read SK because I have a feeling when you make this many changes, they've probably been scrimming a lot more and practicing a lot more than many other teams that are coming into the LEC who probably took longer breaks because you need an opportunity to try out those players and to try and build synergy. So they may just have a little bit of a head start right now when it comes to the LEC and it comes to those victories. But I just think that Schalke probably could have done more in terms of at least creating some depth on this roster.
What if their contracts are like multiple years and they can't really like just replace people because of Corona? Like the budget might be smaller as well, right? So just like kind of stuck with the same players. You could just have to make the best, right? Like they tried to swap in people from academy. But what else can you do?
I also think it's harder
make those
now.
Contracts. I don't know.
I mean, sure. I also think it's harder now because there's, I believe the way it works now is for like the 4 big European regional leagues, you have the same like contract protection as like LEC teams do. So it's like, it's much more difficult to like go to those teams and to bring up players if they're not like willing to play ball as well.
So what you're saying is we can just safely ignore Schalke for the next, for the foreseeable future.
No one knows what he's saying, mate. He's in a quantum super state position where he simultaneously stands for them, talks about how they're not that bad, and then it doesn't bother ever explaining who's worse.
No. I said they're bad. Look. I was saying in spring, they ended up not being that bad. In summer, week 1, they're bad. I agree. I don't see this roster going very far, but I think you have to give them credit for turning around a 0-8 start to the spring split.
Maybe. Let's talk about SK Gaming, which is the team that we've been referencing them in comparison to. So, Kaas, what were the positives of swapping out these players? How familiar were you with many of these guys that are coming into the roster?
I mean, not really familiar. Let me check their roster.
I mean, I have no insight into like the tier 2 European scene at all. So, these guys just kind of appear, and I look at them once they hit LEC.
Okay, so I think Zaze is pretty good. Like, he was always performing as well in Big. We actually scrimmed against him a lot with Mad Lions LEC, and he was doing well against Marek. So we were a bit concerned on the mid lane department in our game. I mean, swapping Yenex from mid to top, like, there's no other good top laners, right? Like, so I guess this is a good one. I think Trick is no surprises. Like, the problem with our roster is it's like not surprising, right? You can't go there and see at the roster and like look at it and say, okay, these are gonna like suddenly flash on you and they're gonna make flashy plays, because their playstyle is more controlled. Like, I think in the game, Trick has a lot of opportunities to dive bot lanes 3v2, and I think teams like G2, Fnatic, we would take those. Like, okay, it's not like easy, but if you execute it well, then you can make it work. But instead, they always look around the corner. They say, "Oh, you guys are here. Well, we're here too," and then they back out and take the dragon, for example. So I'm not sure about the scale roster.
It feels to me that in some of these games that I've been seeing, that they're winning in spite of Trick rather than Trick being meaningfully contributing to what is going on in game, which I think is surprising, because shouldn't this be Trick's meta? Like, if we go back to his kind of original play style, you would think that this would be highly preferential to a guy like Trick that has long been about farming up and pathing.
I mean, he's kind of like Xerxes, but worse, I feel like. So he has like optimal pathing and he like likes to control neutral objectives. But for the rest, he's like not that gank heavy, and well, I think Trick is more controlled by Crown Shot. I think Crown Shot is like the heart of SK, and he basically shot calls the team, and that you can see also in their gameplay. Like, both support and jungle are always like running to Crown Shot their lane. It's not never on the other side, so it's always around Crown Shot. So we were maybe a bit scared to give Varus to Crown Shot, to see like, hey Crown Shot, we give you Varus, let's see if you can shot call the game,
Yeah, and to speak to Trick's pathing a little bit as well, like, I feel like Trick has always been a player who paths more to cover weaknesses in his lanes and make sure they don't get exploited, as opposed to, like, as Kaas was talking about, like, going like for these dives that we see, the top teams in the LEC going for. So I actually haven't been that high on Trick for a while, and I don't think that even with a lot of the picks in the meta changing, that we're seeing less, power in denying side waves to people when waves are going to be crashing. So Trick, to me, I feel like is not really at the top of his game anymore, and has just sort of fallen down as other junglers have risen up, and that can be a weakness whenever you go up against, G2, Fnatic, Mad Lions, etc.
Anyone with a jungler.
Anyone with a jungler.
To be fair, he did spend 2 games playing Sett, which I don't...
Looked awesome when Razork played it. Yeah, what were you going to say? There was only like 100 and something champions in the game, Monty. Like, what's he supposed to play? He should just play a different game. That's the answer.
Yeah, I'm like Sett's best gank path is to, go under the tower, because then he doesn't have to, you can just run away from him otherwise.
I do find like this splits like Hex Flash Phase Rush Sett jungle sort of interesting. Like, I still don't understand, Graves was available in the game that you played against SK.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a bit surprised that we didn't see a Graves pick in one of the few games where Graves was not banned, especially with Trick.
What can I say about Graves without leaking too much? I mean, Graves is for sure a power pick, right? But you have to make it work. It farms a lot. And okay, let's say there are certain enchanters in the team, right? Like, you don't want to take away the farm from the AD carry, because the enchanter is gonna feed the AD carry, right? So in most of the games, there's always an enchanter. So I think that, my opinion is that Graves is not so good into enchanters.
Fair enough. Since we're talking about SK, I think we should have a discussion about what you guys were doing in that game, because your draft was super interesting, keeping the Wukong on the table as a flex until the very end, which then baited out the Karma top lane so you could play a tank. Karma isn't going to do anything to Maokai in the top lane, so Maokai just gets a bazillion farm and becomes invincible. Now, what's interesting to me is, so when we see the Senna, and the Grasp of the Undying Senna is kind of a newer thing for this split, right? So having that in lane and getting the extra healing off of that ability, and especially as she gets tankier and tankier with like Frozen Mallet, and then you have the Wukong. How worried were you about flexing the Wukong into the Varus Bard? Because it seems like it might be difficult to farm if you're Wukong under those circumstances.
I mean, so it's like scary. Like there's a few points where it's scary, and that's like the first levels, right? Level 1 to 5. But basically, Senna provides the sustain you need, and if you cover the first dive, you're good to go. And like I think SK tried to dive, and I think Shadow was there, level 3, to prevent that dive. And then from that point on, we were like basically okay, because like once Wukong hit 6, I think they one-shot the virus already. So then we're chilling. What was weird is like that they actually, we could have also flexed Wukong jungle, you know, like the Wukong can go on a lot of space, on a lot of roles right now. So the draft on red side, like Wukong isn't bad for that. I
think you proved that. Not your first game notwithstanding, but I think you had fewer options when you didn't have this. You obviously had fewer options when you didn't have the Senna on the table. I think it's what was so cool about this composition is you figured out kind of the same way to apply the Varus pressure, but you did it this time through teleport flanks rather than a Lee Sin, Yuumi, and a Hecarim, right? So you have so much hard CC pressure from Maokai and Wukong coming in from the flanks. And you also, because of the way you're building Senna and the Trundle, if somebody oversteps, like they're going to get Trundle pillared, or they're just going to get slowed by the Senna. So I thought this was just a really fucking cool draft, and I think it was a really fucking cool execution. And I said this about Mad Lions on Twitter too. What is so scary about this game and the game that you guys played against Excel is that this is a completely different way of seeing Mad Lions from what we saw last split, where you guys were playing the scrappy mechanic skirmish style. These are very specific compositions where your players have to know how to execute on these win conditions in advance. It's not something that you can necessarily just sort of wing. And you did that really, really well. So we talked with Mac a little bit last week. What was your preparation like coming into this split? Because he said he wanted to really differentiate the kind of compositions that you guys were seeing. And I think you guys super proved it this week. And this makes Mad Lions, I think, really a very dangerous team.
I mean, the problem was we're too one-dimensional, right? Like we always had Romney on the weak side. We had like carry bot lane, and we wanted to camp bot lane, Merrick pushing in mid, and vice versa. And obviously, like Mac already said, like G2 didn't figure it out at first. Like they went for the mechanical skill check at every objective, and sometimes they win, sometimes we win. Actually, our players had a lot of fun playing those series, because like there were skill shots everywhere and dodging everywhere, so like that's fun, right? But then the second best of 5 against Fnatic, like Fnatic figured it out how to win against us, right? And we were like, well, what do we do? You know, like we can't go on 1 week and learn a total different style. And then G2 kind of copied it as well, and they managed to do it as well. So yeah, coming into the split,
we basically just said that you couldn't in a week learn a new style, but then G2 just watched that game and in fact instantly learned a new style. So
yeah, but G2 were also world finalists, you know, like
not with that lineup, but technically, yeah.
I mean, like they have so much veterans on their team, and we all have rookies. Like I'm a rookie. Mac was a rookie head coach. I think the only one like is Marek and Peter Dunn. and they have to like give their information to us, and like so we can leave.
I mean, when I did the crackdown with Peter, he basically implied that that was a conscious decision, though, to try and practice as few styles as possible because of all the rookies, and that this is the split where, in theory, it's time to experiment, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like we just wanted to get like good at one style, and I think we got pretty good. Like, how else can you compete with these top level players who've been playing for so many years, who knows the tips and tricks in their own like style? Like we have to like just play one style and figure it out all out. But coming into this split, we're like for sure gonna look at way different styles. Like we wanna put obviously our Omni on carry. I mean, it's not becoming a fantasy, you know. Like we're just literally playing top lane carries. Like we're playing around top lane. Like, but like the Senna+Wukong, it brings a total different dimension because like you're not gonna expect it, right? You can flex Wukong, you can flex, for example, a Varus. Like no one did it before, right? But there's all kind of possibilities, and with the mechanical roster that we have, we can pick up champions fast, which gives us the advantage over other teams, I think.
Well, it's also that, you know, there were so many picks. Like what you were doing it's kind of what we saw Fnatic doing in the playoffs. Like it seems like you really learned from Fnatic's Senna play, because you had so many options for, you know, supports you could have farmed up in that scenario had you decided to put the Wukong in the top lane, that it makes it very difficult, I think, for teams to read you guys on red side, especially when you pick Senna like that. And you pick Senna deep in the draft. If they don't play Senna, then they're just going to have to ban it against you because it just opens up too many possibilities for the last pick.
I mean, there's always certain picks that are decent into Senna, right? It doesn't matter what you play with Senna. But actually, we should have done one thing, like in the draft, like when the draft was done, Maokai and Wukong shouldn't have switched, and then they might have thought that like Wukong was top lane and Maokai was support, you know, and then on 20 seconds we should have swapped. But like we still could have sent the Wukong top and Maokai bot. Like it's not impossible, you know.
Sure. What was your read on this draft in particular in this game, Ender?
So I actually think that so the thing about Mad Lions is that they have the same idea, even though it's like really different putting a Wukong in bot lane as opposed to like the Hecarim top lane last game. The idea is like jump on enemy backline.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
With all of this stuff. And that's sort of where I'm like, okay, so I see very different picks, very different ways of approaching it. But at the end of the day, the same end goal is going to be there. When every other team is playing like sort of the complete opposite, where we're seeing like more ranged characters in the same games in the like the last 2 years. We haven't seen this with like range supports, like range junglers now even too. So I really like this way of playing. It's also like, it doesn't necessarily mean like it's the safest way to play, because you could just build, you know, the perfect like, oh, protect our backliners and try to avoid that. But when you see comps that have really lacking peel options, like SK's comp in this case, like Mad Lions are just going to run over these guys if they can get in from behind them. Because sure, if you run directly towards them, you know, Karma, Mantra E is going to be pretty effective. Varus ult is going to be too. But I was impressed with the overall ability for them to just sort of jump on SK and blow them up instantly. And I was very hesitant of the Wukong bot lane at the start. I was like, this seems like it's going to get destroyed inside of the lane. But then Crown Shot and Limit didn't really pressure it too hard. So once it got through that, I was thinking Mad Lions had a really solid chance.
I find it interesting that we haven't seen more of this, considering the speed boost to teleport now, because it seems like that, you know, with the number of teleports that are available within a game of League of Legends and the number of positions that are running that summoner, that you would have more opportunities to shut down poke compositions, especially when we're seeing poke compositions be so dominant without a significant amount of self-peel.
I mean, you also have to ask yourself the question, what supports are capable of picking up these champs? When we started scrimming, we had the idea, like, we play Senna+Wukong. I thought we saw it somewhere in the Euro League. And we asked Kaiser, hey, you want to play Wukong this game? He said, yeah, sure. Like, yeah, sure. And they stomped the bot lane. Like, it's like just a gift, you know? Like, you can give a champ to this man, like Kaiser, like, he will just make it work.
But is Wukong that hard to play? I mean, he is slightly harder since the rework, because you have to consider the clone now. But I mean, he's never been super demanding. Let's be real.
I mean, it's not super demanding, but like you still have to play side lane, you still have to use your teleport, you still have to like build the items, you still have to like flank and be the carry, and not a lot of supports can do this, I think.
I think another like really underappreciated skill when it comes to learning new champions is not necessarily like how do you execute on like playing this champion mechanically, because I think pretty much all pro players can, you know, play a wide array of champions, but knowing like how much damage does your character actually deal, because I guarantee you like Kaiser already probably not super familiar with Wukong damage after the rework, but then when you consider its support role and like filling with the Senna, like that's something that seems like you're just going to need, you know, a solid sample size of games on before you're actually comfortable pulling that out on stage.
Yeah, I agree with Ender. Like there's more things to it.
Do you think that this is going to be a hallmark of the summer split? Is this flexibility from the support position? How important is having a good support player right now?
I think it's a flexibility of every player. Like you can basically flex a lot of champions, but your players need to be able to do it. And then you can win drafts really easy, and then you get like crazy games, like us against SK.
I'll say, actually, that's an interesting thing that when I did my episode not that long ago with Kelsey, that she actually thinks that the whole LPL finals and the MSC and stuff was basically about who had the best support counter picks, and that whoever had that basically had like that was like the big X factor in most of the teams. So the teams that had like the good support, but he only plays the three things that he always plays, that's actually the weakness right now. Would make sense based on what you're saying now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like there are certain supports in the LEC that like have a small champion pool, and you can basically predict what they're gonna play, right? So that makes the draft 20 times easier. Like
even some of the good ones, though. I mean, people say that about Hylissang, who's one of the best in theory, but
I mean, I think
if you can get him on if you can get him on the certain champions, he definitely was.
I think Hylissang is one of the exceptions. I think Hylissang is the support that our bot lane is the most afraid of.
Well, he was the one who showed off in the playoffs that you could run the Trundle and playing the Zillion. I mean, he was a core part of this. Like, if he hadn't been able to do that, then the Senna wouldn't have worked for them, which was a complete 180 in Fnatic strategy, because I think they played it once in Spring Split before playoffs, right? Is that right, Ender?
I don't actually think they'd played Trundle support.
No. They played Senna.
Oh, Senna. Yeah. They played Senna, I think, once.
I mean, Senna Zillion, right?
Yeah. Or twice, maybe, with Senna Zillion.
Like the weird thing about Fnatic is like everyone predicted that Reckless doesn't play Senna, right? Like everyone thinks, okay, Reckless is this veteran who plays a certain amount of champs, and he doesn't pick up champs easy, but the champs he plays, he's really good at, right? But actually, I remember like scouting players and scouting Reckless, and I saw him play like 40 Tahm Kench games normals in a row, and I was like, well, what are you planning on doing? You know, like. So we assumed that Hylissang also would play Senna, and then Reckless would fill in the Tahm Kench.
Interesting. Let's talk about Origin. Because
okay.
I hate watching this team play League of Legends. Like, I find it, as much as I enjoy watching Alphari, like, I find the style of their play just incredibly boring. And I don't think that this team is going to be very versatile when it comes to strategies heading forward in this split. They seem like, and I think it's weird, because if we were looking at Xerxes last split and saying, wow, this guy is out there playing Karthus and farming up a Storm, shouldn't this be the meta for OG? Like, why were they so underwhelming this week?
Honestly, OG was really weird, because I agree with you. Like last split, like they did definitely take their time, especially in mid games to close games out. This week it was sort of different, where like especially in their game against Misfits, they went for a comp that like had to attack you in like side lanes in mid game with like the Echo mid and the Renekton in top lane. So it almost seems like Origin is trying to reinvent themselves to some degree, coming into the summer split, which I also noticed in Xerxes' play, because Xerxes is a jungler who I always say is like the most efficient jungler in the LEC, where, you know, he'll hardly ever leave camps, up for too long, and he's constantly out leveling his opponents. But in that first game against SK, he's spending so much time sort of running around the map, covering his lanes, that he's actually falling down into CS to trick, which I never see happening.
Sure.
So I don't know if this team, like, you know, started scrimming late coming into the split, or, you know, just hasn't really figured out their read on the meta just yet. But it feels like they're trying to change things, and that there's definitely like a lot of growth left before they, you know, reach what they were doing in spring.
I mean, we actually scrim them like quite often, and they are actually trying to change things up. Like before, like for example, Nukeduck wouldn't really move from mid lane. This was like a given fact. He would stay on mid lane. He wouldn't like play like Caps, push a wave and dive. No, he would like push a wave and maybe freeze or reset or like take an advantage for himself, right? But in scrims, like he's like now moving, and I think we saw that in the first 3 games as well. I think they're having a bit of problems like transitioning to this style they're trying to play, because it's obviously they're veterans. It puts them on a comfortable zone. So it might be a bit shaky, but it might pay off in the end, you know?
And that's what I'm sort of hoping for too, because like Origin like are the team that on paper should be like the 3rd best team in the LEC, right? Like they've got a great roster that they were able to put together. And last split, you know, they ended up getting 4th, and you know, I still would like to see a best of 5 between Origin and Mad Lions, and I think we were sort of denied that because you guys ended up beating G2 and getting yourselves.
Sorry. Next time.
Yeah. Yeah,
next time we'll just, you know, like
just lose to G2 like you were supposed to. Okay.
Yeah.
No, but I feel like an Origin team that would just sort of stay stagnant would be sort of what I like expect from the org, and I at least appreciate that they're trying to, you know, change things up and make themselves more versatile.
I mean, their analysts also like, I mean, left, right? So maybe they have a big loss in that as well for the first week. Like, who knows? Like, maybe he did a lot. Maybe he helped a lot with the draft. Maybe now Giotto has like do it on himself with the influence of the players, and that's also like a change, you know?
Is Nukeduck the right player for this team? Is he the right player in League of Legends anymore? Because when you guys
spicy questions.
I mean, said a single player in the whole league's bad. They were even like trying to make Trick sound like he wasn't the worst jungler. So I don't think he's going to go where you think, Monty.
What do you want us to say, Monty?
The only way you would ever get... Here's what we'd have to do, Monty. We'd have to go like Inception into their minds. And here's how we would actually get them to flame Nukeduck. I would have to say he's the best mid laner and everything he's doing is awesome and all the picks make sense for him. Then these guys, just because they simultaneously, like a cat falling with a piece of toast with butter on its back, somehow it has to resolve itself. So they would have to, in the end, agree that I'm wrong, which would mean they'd have to eventually flame Nukeduck. So we'll just do it that way if you want, guys. I think I figured out the formula.
Well, Ender, this one is for you.
All right, sweet. Oh, thank you. Let's
no problem. Got your back.
Honestly, I was super disappointed in Nuke. Oh God, dude, now Thorin's gonna be like, exactly, I was right. Okay.
he solved it. He solved it.
You solved the problem. No, I actually think Nukeduck in spring, for a lot of the reasons that Kaas brought up, I was very underwhelmed. And like the strange thing was like you would see him like start to walk bot lane, and then he would like go halfway through the river and be like, no, I changed my mind. I must go back to mid. So like. In spring split, I would say yes, he was a liability for the team. And I don't know, can he improve? Possibly. Has he been good in the past? Yes. I again would like to see him do that because, you know, I like when teams are good. But I just don't feel like I have enough tape on him in this split because I know Origin are trying to make changes and specifically around him.
I just think
the year of the duck.
No, it's not. That's been I have heard that so many times.
Please never say that again. That was the Fishios thing, and we got rid of it.
Okay.
I just question whether, with the direction of the game of League of Legends overall, there are even space for players that play like this.
Yeah, in LCS.
That's true.
Here's what I'll do. Being as they're not going to answer the question, I'll answer it in the form of proposing how basically it should be thought about if you want to have a meaningful discussion. Here's how it goes. The question when someone says, is Nukeduck the right player for Origin? The key part is for Origin. It's not, is he a good player in League of Legends? That's a nonsense to the discussion. It's not even worth having. It's not, is he a bad player? That's, again, irrelevant to the topic. The question is, if OG is a team that think of themselves as a top team, a team that one day could be an LEC champion, is Nukeduck the mid laner that's going to get them to that point in time? The problem is this, is that unlike most scenarios where you can look at a team in their position and say, well, you could have gotten this person or this person, actually OG is one of the few teams who cannot get many people. Like, I basically heard they took pay cuts just to get upset into their team. I've heard that basically they aren't one of the highest paid teams in most positions. I've heard that's one of the reasons why they picked up certain other players in their lineup. Also, the Astralis group, who owns their team, was literally having to get people within the whole organization of OG and Astralis, not the players in Origin, I'll point out, to take pay cuts because operationally at the moment they're struggling, presumably with liquid cash. So in those kinds of circumstances where you already were a more budget team than people know, and you had people who were bigger names taking pay cuts to get another good player on the team, I don't think you've really got much choice there. Like, you can't really then just turn around to one of them and go, actually, you can get out now. And also, you're probably not going to gamble on a rookie at that point in time. So I think for me, I know why you bring the topic up, Monty. It could potentially be an interesting discussion because basically the problem is, this is the real question. At what point in time is it diminishing returns to keep with Nukeduck? Because the problem is he's too good a player to just kick out completely, but you are literally turning down all these sick mid laners that come into LEC as rookies to keep him. So eventually, one day down the line, you're going to realize, wait a minute, yeah, Nukeduck was pretty good, but that could have been Humanoid, or that could have been whoever you want, Nemesis, Zars, it could have been any of these guys. So that's really kind of what Monty's asking when he says that. It's is Nukeduck going to stay as this player? Is he he's never probably going to be the best mid laner, right?
I'll tell you why this team doesn't work, right? Like, they have three high resource players. Like, they have Nukeduck, Alphari, and Upset. They all three want to carry, they all three want to shine. And who's going to give up? That's the question.
Well, that's what I hate about the team, though, because I think Alphari's the one who always sacrifices, but I think he's the best of the three. So I hate this team, personally. It's one of the most frustrating teams to watch play in League of Legends,
I have to agree. I think Alphari is the best player.
But that was actually one of their big problems in spring, though, was that they actually, because I remember watching the game, I actually had, long discussions, I think with Andre about this, where it's like, your team just never sacrifices a wave on the map. Like if a wave is getting pushed inside, they always go to it. And you see teams, you can make trades on opposite sides of the map. No, this team would always fan out to all three lanes, push them out, then reset and then go back to their lanes. And that's why their game never progressed forward, because they were never like a G2 or Fnatic constantly trying to set up traps and fog war and
but
stuff
this is not a feasible way to play League of Legends right now. This is a way to play League of Legends from 3 years ago. Like when we actually look at the teams that were successful, take a look at the teams that were in the World Finals last year, FunPlus, Phoenix, and G2. The game hasn't fundamentally changed since then, because even though we did have, of course, the Elemental Dragons added in the off season, and this has changed some of the way you play around objectives, the fundamental way that League changed was playing around laning and playing around wave control and playing around when those waves hit objectives and when you actually dive people under turrets. This is what changed about the game. And so when we look at the Elemental Drakes, sure, it added something to it, but it wasn't like, okay, the teams that are playing more aggressively, that are willing to take more risks, these are the teams that are still going to be successful, because that wasn't the shift that happened during the offseason. So you can't come back and say, okay, let's look at having Nukeduck or building this roster, because that way of playing the game is not particularly effective right now, in my opinion, especially if no one else, especially if you're playing with Xerxes and having this like farm forward jungler. Like, I don't really know where you're trying to, like you're saying, allocate resources here, or who is going to be willing to go ahead and have the balls to make the play. And I just don't even think that's a viable way for most teams to play mid lane right now, especially when you have a player like Alphari in the top side who should be demanding more of your resources, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that's why I think that OG, the noticeable changes in their gameplay from week one, albeit they lost and did not look fantastic, are hopefully a step in the right direction, because again, spring split, like they were a good enough team to beat our other teams, even without, playing the game how I think most people would consider optimally. But yeah, I think the changes they made are a step in the right direction.
I mean, I totally agree with Thorin too when he's saying like it's hard to make the decision to get rid of Nukeduck, because that's always been Nukeduck's problem, is that he brings a certain floor to your team where you're going to get consistent results, but he's not going to put you over the top. Like, you need some level of risk in League of Legends right now. Look, I was always the proponent for playing like a bitch and playing a control style, right? So in theory, like, I should be the one advocating for Nukeduck if I thought that style was viable, which I don't. I don't think it's even possible to play that way anymore.
Do you want me to give you a little speculative theory? I think this is how former superstars who play mid lane keep having a job for the rest of their careers, because it happens to all of them, right? Look at all the great mid laners from Europe that are old mid laners. So Froggen, Bjergsen, Jensen, Nuke, they all just become fucking mage players who just sit in the mid lane. That's it. All they do is like go, right, I always get my CS, and I don't throw the team fight. I kill people if they're in range, but I won't let myself die. I'm still going to stay alive. And at the end of the game, I'm never the fifth man. I'm never the odd man out. I'm never the worst player.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I get fired, and I've got the superstar name. So as long as I have a decent game, the fans of mine go, yeah, he's still pretty good. And that's all you need to keep a career for a few years. Unfortunately, you think about when those players, some of them were really aggressive. That was at the beginning of their careers. Because I tell you what, if you want to be the mid laner that just goes ham and gambles on everything, basically players like Caps, you better fucking be as good as Caps. Because all those games you have that you int, go ask my boy Leader about this, you will get crucified for the games that you win. You will get crucified for the games you don't carry. So if you want a nice career, but not to win, just do what they do. Just play. Basically, just don't rock the boat. That's what they do. Just don't rock the boat in the middle and just farm. That's all. But it's blame the jungler. It was him. He should have gone in.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, guys. It's never going to go back to that style. And it's not just because of the way that Riot's balancing the game. Here is the reason why you cannot be an inactive mid laner any longer. It's because everyone has gotten better at playing League of Legends, and the mid lane has the highest priority on the map because of its location. So you would have to so radically change League of Legends because everyone has gotten better about map movements. Everyone has gotten better about prepping waves, about getting the crash timings down so that you can have these roams. That even if it did make sense, if we could roll back the clock, if we went back in time 2-3 years ago, I still don't think you would be doing this right, because I think those players, with the knowledge that they have right now, would absolutely destroy you.
I know what the solution is, right? Obviously, we can't do it in OG because Alfari's there, but Nukeduck needs to roll swap to top lane and just go play for some bottom of the LEC team. He'll be one of the best top. He'll just be on an island the whole game. He'll just farm. Jungler will come half the time. Half the time it won't. It'll just be a distraction, and then he'll just be doing his job. No problem solved. Then we bring in a young mid laner for them. OG, let's get it going.
Just Gen X himself.
Just claim from Oceania though. Like this, get a real one this time.
Holy shit. Fuck you.
I mean, just in case they're unclear, instructions unclear, recruited Realman V2.
I don't know. I think this is such a ludicrous concept to me at this point in time, because I understand what teams are doing by trying to bring that veteran presence and that kind of old way of playing the game. And like Thorin said, you're never going to be the one who's cut, but you are so limiting yourself. Like, show me a team that doesn't have an active mid that has a championship ceiling right now. That team doesn't exist. Name one team in the world who you think is going to be able to challenge for a championship without having an active mid laner.
I guess this is why FPX won Worlds, right?
Like, I don't even like DoNB, but they won. Like, look at Knight right now.
Why don't you like DoNB? Let's bring up that.
So I've already done it before, mate. Just because he plays with
the questions now.
Dark technology bullshit, and he's not like a hard carry mid lane and stuff. Yeah, we've done that one before. Don't worry, mate. I think we pivot now because we've done the show for quite a while. So I want to talk. Like, one thing we must talk about, we'd be remiss not to mention at all, is fucking Vitality. Like, this team was the team. This is the team, I believe, got the most unfair narratives about them in spring. Because what's funny is people memed on them in spring like they were Schalke. Like, look at this team. It's just shit. What idiot made this team? What are you talking about? They didn't have the fucking potential superstar mid laner the entire split. Like, he had visa problems. They literally had to use fucking Selfie at one point in time. I'll agree. You can certainly debate should they have taken out Steelback and done this support shit. That's an angle you can go with. But I thought it was really unfair the way people criticised Vitality, because basically that split was a write-off. There was almost nothing they could have done at that point in time. So the new lineup already had some potential. But what do you think of this lineup, Kaas? What do you think of Vitality?
I mean, okay, so this lineup can actually be good. Like, Labrov is a pretty good support. Like, Labrov has potential, and Labrov and Come Together are actually pretty decent. Militia he's still doing some things wrong, but I can see that Duke will like learn him how to play mid lane properly, right? And Cabochard is just Cabochard, and actually Cabochard was playing really well. Like, on the sign against G2, like he found the flanks, he found the engages, like he was doing his job. I must say, like, all the games that Vitality played, like, Duke basically outdrafted their opponent, right? Like, I think Duke is like doing a lot of work, but this team has potential to be like a playoffs team for sure.
Disclaimer, Duke used to be in Splice. Splice is now Mad Lions.
No comment.
I don't really have a very good read on Vitality, just because I've only seen the games from them with this new lineup that have happened this past week, and it was, I would say, pretty uneven in terms of performance. Like, the consistency didn't seem to really be there. Like, they got completely dominated by Fnatic, but then also looked really good against G2. So I don't even have a sense kind of besides Cabochard, like, what these players' champion pools are, or the level of versatility in terms of their pools and their play style. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot to contribute in this particular aspect.
All right, come on, Endo.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think consistency is a hard word to throw around for like the first week, because like you expect them to lose to Fnatic. I think is fair to say. And
you expect them to lose to G2 though. I mean, they had a really hard week as well, right?
But so, like, I don't want to take anything away from Vitality's win against G2, but G2 were not G2 in that game. G2 were making a lot of, like, very obvious mistakes in how they chose their fights. And, you know, props, especially to the bottom lane in that game, because I think LeBron played a very solid game on the Thresh. And as Kaas was talking about, like, Comp looks good too. When in spring, I thought he was a liability. And, you know, sort of when I, like, scouted him coming into the LEC too, like, I wasn't super impressed by his play, but that bot lane seems like it has some built-in synergy right there and has some potential. On top of that, we also saw Melitza get to play as Jace against G2, which was cool because he is a big-time Jace player. I know from Insoliq, I believe.
So if we talk about the G2 against Vitality matchup, I actually don't want to say that G2 played bad. I think Vitality just played good, right? Like Ender is saying. Their draft was on point. Like, they have Kalista Thresh. Like, what G2 wants to do, they want to push mid, roam into bot. Couldn't, because Kalista Thresh, every time the lantern goes out, you can't dive Sion. So what are you gonna do? Chase hits your turrets hard, so you have to be fast on mid lane again. Like, there's a lot of things in that draft that made it work for them. Also, G2 didn't have the play potential to get back in the game. Like, if you have enough engage, you can never get outskilled, right? Because you can always make picks, you can always do whatever you want. Like in theory, right? Like, not practical always. We saw that a bit. Like, we saw a pick on Digi, I think, on the mid lane. They one-shot the Gragas, and then they still lost the fight 4v5. Because their champions just don't allow it.
I'm trying to remember that player on mid lane, because I remember the one where, like, the Herald was started that I thought, like, G2's approach was pretty bad, but that wasn't where NG got caught.
No, this was just on the mid lane. I don't know what time it was. It was more to the end game. I think they finished the game after. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because where I was specifically disappointed in G2 was like the first Herald, where like G2 sort of set up this fight inside of mid lane, like trying to pick off Lebrov, I believe, and then Wonder, instead of like walking down, is like fighting NG over who can get the Rift Herald, and then they like walk straight into NG, who then has ult at the end of the fight. And so I saw it was uncharacteristic, because I think G2 is just the best team fighting team in the LEC, and they were making a lot of mistakes where I don't know if they were like not communicating well with one another or just like disrespecting Vitality. But like there was a lot going on that I didn't like.
They were really slow to rotate in general that game, which was surprising considering that you're operating there with a Galio that should be able to really get the jump on people in terms of it contributing to those team fights. But often it was Kabashard who was getting there first on the Scion and kind of starting off these engagements with a man advantage. So G2 just looked really out of sorts in terms of their communication.
Yeah.
But again,
should we talk about LCS?
Oh God. Did you watch any LCS cast this weekend? Did you punish yourself?
So I have to put priorities on my time, and
no, that's the worst way you could have said it.
you were busy watching the JDG versus Top series instead of the TSM versus Team Liquid series.
Yeah, I didn't watch a TSM vs Liquid.
Okay, let's start here.
Enlighten me.
Do you watch any LCS at all?
Yeah, sometimes if I have time.
Okay. Did you watch any Cloud9?
Last split, yes.
Okay, but not so far this split.
No.
What were your thoughts? Let's set the stage of, in a fictional universe where MSI would have happened. As an analyst, where do you think Cloud9 would have ended? Like, what was impressive to you about Cloud9? What did you think their weaknesses were? How do you think they would have stacked up against LEC teams?
I mean, I actually watched the Crackdown with Sven because it was super interesting to see like how Sven is on this team and like what keeps him motivated, right? Because he like is a little bit older player, and to hear him that like everyone is basically playing solo queue, everyone is playing duo queue, everyone is doing their thing, and that like motivates each other and like stacks it up. I think that is really key in Cloud9's success. So going off on that, I think they would have success, like better than in the years before, obviously. But yeah, can't know, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just it's MSI's a weird tournament because I feel like, to me, like I couldn't in good conscience like vote C9 over like any of like the other major region representatives. Like I do think they have like a fairly competitive roster, but you sort of see it every single time every single time they go up against like the top teams, at Worlds and whatnot, that I think just LPL, EU have better read on the meta, have a better understanding of how to play out the game. And while like they can look good, I think overall, I don't have faith in them to win a best of 5.
I mean, the problem is their practice, right? They have to practice, like they can't practice against EU teams, right? You only, I mean, yeah. So who do you practice is the question.
Well, theoretically, they would have been able to practice against other teams at MSI. And I know from talking to the team and to Reaper, like they were really pissed off that MSI didn't happen because they thought that was their one chance to actually get good practice so that they could improve to a point where they could be more competitive at Worlds, right? So they're pretty upset about this tournament in particular being canceled because it felt, for them, I know it felt like all that work they had done, and as much as they can shadowbox, they do, but it's just obviously nothing compares to actual practice. All right, so shall we discuss TSM? By the way, guys, like I do want to put this out here that if TSM is like a middling team this split, as hilarious as it is for me to watch them lose, one of the things that I think we've kind of uncovered on this show, talking to people like Papa Smithy, is that so much of the focus goes into TSM, and I'm sick of dealing with them day in and day out when they're just going to be a mediocre team. So we do have to laugh at them a little bit this week, and we do have to discuss them because of the roster change. But if they're going to be a 5th or 6th place team, I'm fucking done talking about them. I would much
basically every straw man argument that all we do is talk about TSM and that TSM makes us rich from all the clicks and views. I don't know how it would ever make you rich if people actively downvote you if you talk shit on them. I don't know if you know how Reddit or content works, guys. Obviously you don't. But the point Monty's making is one I agree with, which is as long as they're an elite team, then every time we talk about LCS, we will not only discuss them, but we would have to. But I agree, if they end up being the 6th or 7th best team, I vote we treat them like that. and
Yes.
only give them talk in as much as, wow, this is a better roster than you'd expect, Phil, and that's it. We're not going to make like 20% of the show TSM. That's because they used to be that relevant in the past. I agree with you.
Like, in a way, like, I feel like the LCS broadcast is also, you know, you have to talk about it now because of the change, but I think last split, they way, you know, overcompensated on talking about that team. And we discussed how it was at the expense of 100 Thieves having a very strong finish to their season, Sunday being arguably the best top laner in the league. And, you know, they've completely
FlyQuest, all the teams that were better.
Yeah. So like, I'm frankly, I'm really sick of this. And, you know, we're talking about a team that hasn't won a championship in years at this point and has sort of regressed split by split over that time period. And now can't even get a coach, even when they put out a public call for one. So here comes Parth again to be the coach of this team.
Can I also just say this as well, right? The reason why Doublelift used to be amazing at trash talk is because nobody trash talked back then. Nobody even attempted it. And most people who didn't have like wit or charm, and they definitely weren't usually American, so they didn't actually have like great understanding of English. Now he's actually like an average to slightly below average trash talker. Like his version of trash talk is just to like 180 his position all of a sudden. So like coming into this split, he was saying like, oh, you know, teams that kick me should be scared, and you know, I'm more motivated than ever, I'm hungrier than ever. He said in an interview with Ashley Kang, I want the next 2 years of my career to be my peak. None of that makes any sense, mate. Like, first of all, it's not very funny as trash talk. It's just like a basic attempt, but it doesn't have any basis to it. Like, think about it. What, you're hungrier than ever? You just mailed in a whole split. What are you talking about? You literally got mailed in a split. Then when they benched you and the person replacing you won a game, spoiler, that means your job is in danger. You then instantly came out with statements like, now I'm completely reinvigorated and I am entirely motivated. Now it's like, mate, you're literally the meme of like, what the hell? Now I love that thing I used to hit. That's you. That meme formula is your entire trash talk game now. And also, you're hungry and this is going to be your next career peak. Homie, you've had like an 8-year career. Like you're at the end of your motivation. You're struggling to find it. You've had to literally go back to your ex who fucking broke up with you in a painful divorce. Go back with her to reignite your love life. Like there's not going on there, mate. Obviously, unfortunate choice of words really in many ways on that one. But, you know, just keep it how it is. You know how to do this shit. So all I'll say is this, like, when you talk all that big shit, listen, it's a best of one. Anyone can lose a best of one. But the way you lost this best of one was fucking hilarious. And nobody's even picked up. This is how bad people are with old narratives, Monty. Everyone misses the real coup de grace. The coup de grace in Team Liquid winning is who is their AD carry? The fucking Academy AD carry from TSM last year. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. You could have had him TSM, you dumb fox. Brilliant. Amazing. So, you know, whatever.
It's not only that, but it's the way that the other teams are treating him in that Team Liquid game. The fact that Core looked like he was going out of his way to fuck with Doublelift, and the fact that the team themselves like set their emotes to TSM emotes, like
2017 TSM emotes.
Yeah, exactly. Even the other teams are coming out with the bans, and even the other teams are treating you like a joke. No one is scared of you, TSM. No one. In this league, in this world, like this is the sad state of affairs that you're in right now. You are the cat that's been declawed. You are the monster that was defanged, and you're still trying to be intimidating, and it's just not working anymore. Like your tricks, TSM tricks of old saying, well, we're the top, we're the cream of the crop in North America. We treat our players the best. By the way, guys, I don't know if you saw this because it can't be on Reddit because InVen Global is banned. There was an interview with InVen Global with Dardoch that he literally said that Lena never even personally apologized to him about what happened and that he received zero compensation for the results. So as far as TSM's public statements about how well they treat their players, that's fucking gone now too. And I love this whole thing about TSM too, pretending that they're elite. There was a really funny, I don't know if you guys saw this, there was a really funny post by their social media manager. There was on the solo mid Reddit, somebody was saying like, I wish our team could be better run like Cloud9 and Team Liquid. And he was basically saying like, oh guys, well, we've been crushing it in Fortnite.
Must be illegal. I just hearing that.
Yeah. Cool. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. TSM fans, here is your reality. Here is your reality. Okay. Here's the reality check.
Yeah.
You are an influencer and website company with an esports team attached. You are not an esports team. Do you know what Cloud9 is? Cloud9 is an esports team that doesn't have any of that other stuff that's associated with them, right? The focus is on becoming the best you can be. All right.
Disclaimer: Monty did work for Cloud9 until very recently.
But
just giving disclaimers. Listen,
sure,
it's nice to have them.
Sure, that's yes. But at the core business, Cloud9's business is esports. TSM's core business is slapping sponsors on Myth's Fortnite stream and making the Blitz app.
Also, don't ever talk shit on Cloud9 when it comes to rosters. Jack's so good, he built a second roster in EG that's better than TSM as well. The guy made 2 rosters. You couldn't even make 1. You like that? Yeah, put that in your back pocket.
I appreciate that.
So like, just TSM fans, let's get it straight here. The League of Legends team in the esports side is not a priority. You can see this because even they are bragging about their success of basically being an advertising company. All right? So it's not going to be good. This is you have other competitors who are focused 100%. Their business is being esports, and that's not what TSM is anymore.
But luckily, Dignitas still in the league, so they can get in. There are wins out there to be gotten. Listen, there are wins on the board. All I'm saying.
I will talk about that game because TSM and like the thing about watching them is the complaint that I had about them this year was that they were the team that was constantly like trying to play every single strat in the universe without ever mastering one of them, and they didn't have an identity, and they kept going. And like we saw that again, like who the fuck is gonna put Spica on Kayn in this? Like, do you not even understand the power of the players that you have? This dude is a young, inexperienced jungler, and you're gonna put him on. Look, I don't even think Kayn's a good champion. Like, let's get that out there first. Like, I think he's just shit. But beyond that, like putting the onus on him to carry this game or be on this carry jungler is so weird. Why would you conceptually do that?
I mean, I just think it makes like it's one thing to say like, oh, we actually have faith in Spica, but also like it just doesn't even make sense in the comp here. Like they have 3 lanes that are supposed to like smash. They want to fight on 1 to 2 items, and Spica's like, oh, I'm gonna show up to the fight, and he's just not a champion. So even though they have stronger champions, they roll on up, and because like it's Trundle compared to like a Kayn, like he just couldn't do anything. Like, do I think Spica's the best jungler? No, but did he even have a chance in that game? I really don't think so. It was terrible.
I mean, where does he have to get his form, Like, he can't even get his form.
He can't get anywhere.
At 20 minutes, he didn't have his form, right? Like
23 minutes it took him.
23. Okay.
So,
I mean,
Kaas, do you think...
They already have Elder.
Now, we have seen Kayn picked a little bit in some other leagues. Like, it's not like a complete unknown pick, but we really haven't seen much of it in this first week of LCS besides this, or LEC. Where do you think Kayn has a place in the professional scene?
I mean, right now, how the drafts are looking, a lot of the times the jungler falls through, right? So imagine if there's like Trundle and Graveswand in the first bans, and jungle falls through, and a lot of the other priority junglers are banned, and you can actually have playmaking on the bot lane, for example, because you want to get your form. Then maybe if you have a Yumi, but I think Kayn is only like good if you can counterpick it, and if the enemies legit pick the weakest jungler in the game, and that's Zac, and then you can pick Kayn, and then maybe.
So no, you're saying it's incredibly situational in terms of professional play.
Yeah,
I think if you're significantly better than your opponent, like the opposing team as well, then Kayn might look like the most broken champion in the game. But yeah, I'm not sold.
And why would you need to do this pick anyway? Like, if we take the position of TSM, they wanted double lift, right? They obviously like Broken Blade. Bjergsen, it goes without saying, literally owns part of their team. They're committed to him, and they brought Biofrost back because they believed he's a better player than Smoothie. So all these players that are supposed to be good in the team, why are you putting it all on the guy who's literally not even your first choice for jungle? That's only in jungle because you've kicked out Dardoch. Like, why not give the other players their picks? Let them win the game. Because I'm so sick of seeing junglers ruined as well by these guys. Like, if it's Reginald or whoever it is, Reginald or Path, like, you are the most garbage GM I've seen in fucking years, mate. Like, I don't know what your vision of jungle is, but you just pick people and ruin them. Like, all your first choices are terrible. And then you know what they actually have the gall to do, who are fans of TSM, Monty, and TSM management, is they love to imply as to why they wouldn't even want Xmithy. The idea you're too good for Xmithy. Child, please. He's been won all the championships while you've been watching him win the fucking championship. Oh, he's not motivated. What, like double lift, you dumb fuck? You just recruit him back to the team. He's not motivated at all. Smithy, you should have to literally kiss his fucking feet. You should have to be like Jesus when he washed the disciples' feet, like to show humility. You should do that to Smithy before you ever talk on that man's reputation.
I mean, Thorin, do you know that TSM have a Fortnite team?
Apparently they do. Apparently, yeah. Probably the stocks are way up as well, aren't they?
Look, I don't blame TSM, by the way, for wanting to go into influencers and websites. It's way more profitable than esports. Like, they're fucking crushing the game. Like, from a business perspective, they're doing it right. Like, it's not a criticism of that. It's a criticism of the fact this is the same shit TSM always pulls. Remember how they used to say like, oh yeah, we're totally challenging for the world championship, despite it not even being a reality or even what they were doing, right? This is what they say. They constantly talk about things that are not their focus, that are not even possible, and present it to their fans as if it is. Like, stop lying to your own fans at a certain point in time. All right. Enough about the
I will just say, yeah, exactly. I was going to say, we have then just talked about TSM for 20 minutes. So listen, that was just to set the precedent at the beginning of the split. From now on, honest, we're not going to talk that much. So talk about some other teams, maybe.
No. I do want to talk about this game because it is important from a Team Liquid perspective as well, who had a very strong start. And for TSM, yes, they did win against Dignitas, and I do want to talk about that because they kind of went back to basics. But with this composition, you look at this draft, and everyone was saying when this draft came out, oh, wow, Bjergsen's on Syndra, one of his best champions. Oh, they gave up Kalista. Like, getting both of those picks on blue side is kind of remarkable. And I do think, like, they have a ton of power in the early game. And what was so impressive about Team Liquid here was that they were able to actually dominate the early game. And then if you lose the early game with this composition, you're just not coming back as TSM. And so they completely dropped the ball when it came to being active on the map. And I do understand why they would think this, because if they were playing with Dardoch, if we rewind time to last split, they were frequently doing well in the early game. It was their closing that was a problem. So why not draft for this early game composition? Problem is you kicked that guy who was making a lot of the ganks and dives happen. So this style probably isn't going to go in your favor anymore. And we really saw that here because they just got shit on in the early game. And then there was no chance of them winning late. Like, that was...
Yeah. But the thing is, like, yeah, they have like the strong early game lanes, but it's actually just hard jungle diff. Because, like, yes, like 4 pieces of their comp can say like early game all over it, but if you don't have a good jungler, like a good jungle pick, like you can't actually do anything. So Broxon Trundle just gets like free start Drakes, and then TSM sort of like walk into them, and then they die because again they don't have a jungler. And even if you can get priority with mid lane, what does Bjergsen then do? He can't pair up with a Lee Sin and dive bot lane or dive top lane. He just has to go back to base because there's nothing you can do with a Kayn.
Well, and it also goes back to the fact that if we think about people's criticism and like even reflecting on my initial reactions to this, now there were 3 jungle bans on the side of Team Liquid. So actually it seems like a pretty smart draft in retrospect now to me, because you're taking out the Graves, right? You're taking out the Jarvan, you're taking out the Lee Sin. And so by leaving up the Syndra and Varus, you are actually kind of like baiting them into picking these things while you just sit there and take the Trundle. And then you're like, okay, Spica, what else can you play that can actually synergize with these picks that can get an early game advantage? And the answer was nothing. It was Kayn. I mean, so like they sure, but I don't know what Spica plays. Like, I don't know how, like, sure, there are other options, but my point is like, you kind of did pinch the jungle pool like super hard by doing that. And I think it shows some pretty smart play there by Liquid.
It's also, if you notice, like there was a lot of people actually in interviews, because obviously TSM is always the headline for like the clickbait or whatever, but like a lot of people in interviews were also predicting what I said basically, which is that Team Liquid look like they'll be better than TSM actually. Like the pieces they have are still pretty good. Even the guy replacing him, he has no big name, but like he's perfectly fine as an AD carry. There's no problem there.
About the draft for a second, I just checked it up, and like they get counterpick support, mid lane, and top lane on red side. Obviously, like Azir falls through second round, but still, like you can't let your mid laner support and top laner get counterpicked because you're not gonna have any prio lanes. Syndra usually has automatically prio, but like where is she gonna go? For me, it's also weird that they don't ban Azir second round and they ban Echo, for example, and Echo LeBlanc, because like if Kalista gets Death Dance, like LeBlanc can't really do anything anymore. Well, you can't really touch Azir. Azir is like standing on the other side of the map, while she's hitting you, and Kalista is bad into long range. So like the draft is like weird.
I also love the MonteCristo last pick from TL because you could just delete whoever does get farm in this game from playing League of Legends. So, even like you see the Kayn coming out, and you're already like, okay, this is kind of funny if you're Team Liquid. And then your answer is, okay, well, if anybody does get ahead, I will just 1v1 them, right? Like, So what are they going to do here? It becomes very rough to play. And then beyond just the draft, like obviously the play itself was just incredibly dominant from Team Liquid. Like there was never any point in time really where TSM was going to win this game.
Yeah, I think they just played like super controlled overall, and like to speak to the Mordekaiser as well, like I just felt like their backline was never going to be in trouble because, as you say, like there's two people that can dive Azir or Aphelios, and that's the Aatrox and the Kayn, and one of them just can't play in the team fights, and the other one gets Azir ulted away. And I mean, probably Aphelios can solo kill Kayn. So, I felt like Broxah like controlled early game pretty well, like focusing on objectives, and the team just didn't really have to try too much, and TSM just rolled over.
I think this was a natural strategy to pinch the jungle pool if you're Team Liquid. Like you're not going to have scrimmed against TSM prior to the first week. They've got this new jungler, so you're going to put pressure on him. That's just what you're going to do.
When you see like Syndra, you just want to remove like strong junglers that can pair with it, and like Jarvan, Lee Sin are really good options there.
Yeah, so I think credit to Team Liquid's and Jat, new coach, for like figuring out that this was going to bait them into a Syndra first pick, right? Obviously, if you're TSM, you're going to take that.
Who would know TSM better than Jat himself?
That's true.
That's what it was all for, baby. That's what it was all for.
The other thing that I love about this, by the way, is that like for most teams, Syndra would be a flex pick. It's not going to double lift. It will never go to double lift in this draft, so you don't even have to worry about it, right? Like you already know exactly where it's going.
It's weird that he doesn't ever get motivated and hungry to learn those mages.
I mean,
he played Vladimir.
So
someone else played Syndra for the first time this weekend.
Who?
Someone in Europe. Reckless.
Oh, really? Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Sure.
And then I think like to go into, I don't want to spend too much time with this because I think Dignitas is not a very good team, but I did appreciate at least that TSM did kind of go back to more standard champions. And I also think that Dignitas, at least first off, I think the NA junglers should not play Nidalee. I just don't think the region is capable of executing on Nidalee comps. But they went for this super heavy like poke composition with Nidalee.
What is it with anyone just fucking their jungler and just bottlenecking the whole comp? Is it like a new thing or something?
I don't know.
You can just pick like easy champions, just let people win the game. Like, what is this shit?
I don't know. You also have
Are you making the burden of execution like as high as possible?
You have to have like pressure with Nidalee to like invade their jungle to like mess with the Trundle. Is Froggen that guy? Maybe not. Like the poke composition here, the issue is that when you don't have any hard CC, like hard CC engage with this poke composition. So here's how it like Dig works in these team fights. Okay, I poke you with Ezreal, I poke you with Nidalee. Now what? Well, I can't engage on them really. So if I do try and engage on them, double lift just presses R on Misfortune, you Misfortune ult, and there's your counter engage. So as long as double lift has ult, there's not really much that Dignitas can do to even follow up on the poke damage.
Also,
I'm going to say one thing.
I was going to say, yeah, also Yuumi can just heal it, and all other 4 champions have built-in sustain into their kit. So if you can't actually capitalize on the CC, it's not going to do anything.
You know what, Monty? It pains me to say this, but you have to be fair. You have to be even-handed. I mean, I don't have to. I've built a whole career, some would say, of not being, but I'll do it for the sake of this one episode. So You know what? I can't believe that Afromu has gone from MSI final, champion of LCS, even champion without Doublelift, just winning without him, all right up here. We're talking like, for me at that point in time, I literally put him in that class with like Mithy, like fucking the greatest supports to ever play in the West. Now he is fucking Kiwi Kid. This guy is a check stealer and a fucking half. He's been stealing checks for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Like, it's outrageous. I don't know what's going on at this point in time, because like every time I keep seeing a new split, I think, right, maybe he's taking time out, maybe he's remotivated to the game. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just a non-factor. Like, as far as I can tell, he is one of those players who is just getting by off their name. Like, their name value still gets them in teams, but like, I think if you took the nameplates off, there's a million people at the academy or support or like National League level who get in over this guy. I'm telling you.
Sure. The problem is, I think you'd have to import one because NA supports are super bad. Like
in this particular case, let's go for it. Let's go for it. I'm up for it. Yeah, I'm down. Deal. I didn't know that second part of that. Doesn't really be a deal.
Yeah.
Like if TSM's got one, I mean, they've got that guy Treats or whatever, and fuck it, just bring all of everyone that was on TSM's academy squad, put them in the real teams. Obviously, TSM can't identify talent, so logically, if they picked them but didn't put them in the main team, probably good. Johnson, get all of them, fucking get them all out there.
I mean Thorin, we do have to look at what the NA support options are, right?
You know what? Everyone loves to meme. I tell you what, Hacker War is better than fucking Afromu. Let's stop talking shit and get that guy back in LCS.
Wait, can we talk about that academy team for a second?
The academy team's got some talented players, mate. What? Yeah, I agree. They've got some skilled players on that team.
Okay, I agree with you about Hakuho, sure. My point is that can we discuss who is a starting support in the LCS these days besides Afromu?
Yeah, but here's the problem as well, Monty. I forgot this actually. You just reminded me. Remember this. They even say in Dig, they have the gall to say they don't even have a starting five and that they have a 10-man lineup and they're rotating everyone in, except Afromu, because he's just never going to be taken out for some reason. So, like, they've invalidated the entire concept in week one. No, the thing is, like, obviously it is a trash role generally.
I would say that
probably the worst role in the region, let's be real.
Yes. Like, well, I mean, sure, mid is an option, but at least they have imported mids. I think if you look at the strength of support players in LCS, it is tragic. There is a reason why Vulcan cost, what, like $1.75 million to buy out. Think about that. A support player costs that much. That is crazy. But the reason is because you don't have any good options. Like, all the options suck except for Vulcan, basically. Like, if you actually go through the support players, would you like somebody better than Stunt on 100 Thieves? Yes, you would. Would you like somebody better than Zazel on Evil Geniuses? Yes, you would.
I'd still take Zazel over Afromu. That's not.
No. I would definitely take Zazel over Afromu. Don't get me wrong. Like, Ignar is an import. I would take Ignar. He's fine. Smoothie's situation these days. Smoothie's not looking
played out at the moment. Yeah, he's got his problems as well.
Like, Immortals has Gate now because they demoted Hakuho or whatever, right? So my point is that things are pretty desperate here if you're not Core JJ, Ignar, or Vulcan.
I heard Denick and Steelback are looking for some starting spots.
Yeah, that's what's criminal. Exactly.
Like, this is the world where Golden Guardians thought their best option was switching Huhi and Keith McBrief to support. This is LCS. Fabulous.
I want to know this. Like, let's talk about one of the teams who's actually good. So FlyQuest is actually one of the better LCS teams. What do you think of FlyQuest, Ender?
Honestly, I think it was the C9 game was the only one I caught with FlyQuest.
All right, what do you think?
So they started off the game really well, and then Santorin and Ignar do this like wild chase where they both just like run into Blabber inside of the river. So it was just like a weird. So I'm like, wait, like C9 actually kind of like ran it down with this.
C9 should have lost this game
in the river, and then it's Corky and Ezreal who are like completely, gonna do well going to the late game. Like, all you have to do is not fight Olaf, and then he's gonna turn into a piece of shit, late into the game. And they decided to give some kills over. That turns into a Drake, and then all of a sudden, like, C9 can sort of snowball off of that when their window to actually shift like the pace of that game was like just about to reach its end with like the effectiveness of their champions kits.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Cloud9 was super sloppy at the beginning of this game. And I think that they were lucky to have that opportunity to turn it around. But the thing about C9 is that they will take those opportunities. Unlike any other team in North America, if you do give them that opening, they will close on you. So that's the one bright spot, I guess, about, you know, the LCS.
One of the problems I have with this topic, right, is first of all, one of the reasons why the finals sucked, unfortunately, for LCS is because of all the teams that were at the top level in LCS. FlyQuest probably had the worst matchup against Cloud9 and had no chance to win. Then add in, they're one of the main practice partners of Cloud9, as far as I know. And Cloud9 always compliment them, they're very respectful. It's yeah, that means you fucking, they're your punching bag. But okay. So in that scenario, I can only imagine they must be inside their own head so much when they play against Cloud9. That was in that scenario, I'm sure they just got way too horny going for that shit. They go, we can get a kill here. Remember, if you've played 1 million games against one opponent and lost every variant of them, you're just going to try random stuff like that. But it's going to look stupid, unfortunately, because it's going to be a game within a game. But I can understand why it can happen.
Yeah, because it's they got trained the wrong way in the early game, because they won a fight that I don't think they should be able to win at that stage in the game. So then I guess they can think they keep winning those. But yeah, it just didn't work out. And I mean, this team was pretty good last split, so I just don't really have a great read on them so far, because it's just this one game that I feel like they should have won but couldn't.
Right, what about this then? So the other team to talk about, Monty, is Evil Geniuses, right? They deserve to be talked about as well. What do you think about Evil Geniuses?
I thought they looked much better, at least coming into this week. I don't know how much I really need to read into them at the current point in time, just because they were, they stomped CLG, which is not, what do I really do with that? And then 100 Thieves also hasn't looked particularly strong, but I thought that I think Jizuke is, in the first 2 games, was performing really well. I think that their coordination, especially against CLG,
I've actually figured out he can carry games, believe it or not. You just have to not only team fight 24/7.
But part of this is they played 2 teams that are really struggling. I thought 100 Thieves would be better than they were to start off this split, and they played really badly this week. And CLG is just terrible. For example, 100 Thieves, one of the things you don't do when you play against Corki these days is try and fight Herald at 8 minutes when he gets his package. And 100 Thieves literally just files into the Herald pit and then just gets destroyed by...
You know what happened there, Monty? I've got an explanation, actually. What happened was, there's that famous thing that people say, a piece of trivia, that the human mind doesn't remember the word not. So what happened was, obviously Zix was listen, if there's one thing I can impart into you guys, just do not fight for the Herald against Corki. And then their brains just deleted the not, heard the positive, and then they remembered it in the game. It's just simple psychological warfare. Just update your game, Zix. Listen, you should know that. You were in TSM. I'm sure they turned you out all sorts of ways mentally. So try doing it to the opposing coach now, son.
I also think so that was weird, seemingly not knowing that, or opting into that fight against EG. So EG easily wins. They were able to snowball pretty effectively in that game. And then the second game against CLG, Jizuke, I don't even know what was going on with Ruin. That guy was straight up inting in that game. And then Jizuke was just teleporting all over the map, killing people with Twisted Fate. The other thing is so that was confusing thing. I was okay, 100 Thieves, whatever. The next confusing thing about 100 Thieves was playing a style that was completely antithetical to them. So you have Ryoma, who's a player who never exerted mid-pressure last split. That was not what he did. He doesn't roam. He has good mechanics, but he doesn't have very good game sense. So in no situation would I go into that draft and say, Meteos, we're picking you Kindred. You know that champion that requires you to have pressure so that Kindred can stack marks? You need mid pressure. You need a mid laner capable of exerting mid pressure to get Kindred roaming. So if you are 100 Thieves, you cannot play Kindred. That's not an option for you. So it was just a weird draft too. Anyway, back to EG. I think EG looked good. I think my point is that 100 Thieves was worse than expected this week, and they played against CLG, who looked absolutely terrible. So that said, they closed out effectively. They do look like they're getting better as a team. I think Jizuke is actually a really good player, and I like watching him play. And I think they have a style.
But here's basically where I wanted to go once you've discussed those teams is this, right? Everyone obviously flamed LCS super hard last split because Cloud9 was too far ahead of everyone, and the teams that were like second and third weren't convincing. And then the one team that was supposed to even challenge on TSM didn't even end up being second or third. So it ended up just feeling like, oh, you never got a real like battle for the first place. The problem I'm seeing from the beginning of this split is it looks like it's going to be the same again. Like the teams that are good still are still EG and FlyQuest, and like some of the other teams are okay. Like this, actually, whereas in LEC, you could argue most teams upgraded, and there's only really like Schalke and XL are bad. Everyone else seems decent to good at times. You look at LCS, it looks the same. I don't see where like the improvement is. Like
that's
this looks
not
like
fair.
It's gonna be
Immortals look worse.
Split. Oh, they look even worse. Yeah, you're wrong. Actually, yeah, you're right. They were second place most of last year, and they're even worse now. So they're actually in a worse position, yeah. Because I have a hard time finding who's going to be, like, basically, as far as I can tell at the moment, unless TSM drastically turn it around, the whole split is just going to be, can EG ever get good enough, or will they ever bring Huni in? That might be one topic. And then the other one is, how good can Team Liquid get? That's the only real storylines, as far as I can tell, at the top.
I think Team Liquid looked pretty good this week, honestly.
There's some potential there for sure.
Yeah. Especially, like, the first game was just hilarious, but the second game where they actually made a pretty big comeback and played well and played a little bit more reserved in order to get themselves back into that game was impressive. I thought they were going to lose. So
also, I think legit tactical, really good.
Yes,
so
I agree.
I think this team, like, sure, it's not the championship team that it was like once, but I think this team can actually get back up towards the top again.
Look, I think the strategy is good because you have a world championship support player on your roster. Let that guy train your AD carry. Just get somebody mechanical with half a brain in there and just tell him you will listen to Core JJ now forever. Core JJ also himself used to be an AD carry player, so it's not like he has no skill or experience in that arena himself. So I think this is a really good plan, actually, for Team Liquid. Brox is much more integrated into the lineup right now. I think that's probably helping with motivation. Brox is a good player himself. My main question is whether Jensen is another one of those legacy mid laners that I would love to see some level of reformation of his playstyle that I have never seen into him being more active.
Another one who's just gotten safer and safer over the years. Like, it's actually nuts that these guys just never go in.
So people will always say, like, oh, Jensen was probably the best performing player in the spring split. Well, that's true. It's still the same problem of, is Jensen the long-term solution to this team, especially when you have import slots available to you, right?
Yes. You know, Monty, you remember when TSM fans got really mad at you and said what is a provable lie, which is that they said that you said that Team Liquid purposely tanked the whole split just so that they could, Doublelift tanked the whole split just so that he could get back to TSM, right? Definitely not what you ever said. In fact, your point was that's why you don't allow conflicts of interest to occur, because then someone could think that.
Yes.
But you know what? Even though people made that up and it's absolutely nonsense, I just want to say it is actually genius that Team Liquid tanked the whole split just to trick TSM to take Doublelift off their hands. That's fucking genius, man. Steve, you're 10 levels ahead, man. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, Steve was sitting there thinking, you know what? This doesn't get us any closer to World Spring Split, but I have this expiring contract at the end of the year for Doublelift where he's just going to be a free agent. Oh man, how do I solve this scenario? How do I get a big buyout for Doublelift right now? And then I will cut my own costs by putting a rookie in there and tactical.
And then all of a sudden he heard like a ding dong, delivery guy, I've got a Lenovo package here. It's like, bring it on through. His room's in there. Stay safe, everyone. Be like Jensen. Don't wade in. Don't join this fight. Just stay on the outskirts in case you're doing damage. Just watch your way down. There you go. Right. Well done.
Ender and Kaas are just farming right now. Just keep farming quietly to yourself. But yeah, I think Team Liquid can be good now. I don't think they're going to be as good as Cloud9 unless Jensen has a big change in his play style, which maybe Jat will be able to affect. We haven't seen, I think, a more aggressive, active Jensen in a number of years right now. So I do.
I'd love to, though. The guy who used to play back in like season 6 and he was straight fire. Yeah, that was exactly the mid laner where you get the jungler who's aggressive and then you fucking just use pressure and just dominate the lane. It was an awesome player to watch.
Yeah. So at least we know he has it in him, unlike certain other players like Nukeduck. Like it was there at one point in time. It's just a matter of rekindling the lost flame of Jensen. He can change his name back to Incarnation. Maybe that'll do it. It's a
rank 1 incarnation.
Don't get him banned again. Come on.
The irony is,
bans out these days, though.
The irony is now he's the one who doesn't enjoy solo queue because the ping's too high. End it on that one. End it on that. If anyone knows what I'm referring to, Street Fighter Research.
That was a good. That was a good.
They can figure it out.
Top quality reference. Oh boy, I think I think Team Liquid at least on the right path, right? I think in retrospect that draft they had against TSM was really clever. The comeback win was really good. Tactical looked solid. The other team that I think at least improved was Golden Guardians, who fumbled in the game against Team Liquid, a game that they should have won.
The Monte pickup looks good, though.
Yeah, I think Damonte was I will say this, from talking to people about Damonte in this offseason, because I thought he looked pretty good at Worlds, you know, for an NA mid laner. Like, he's still an NA mid laner, right? But the question is, can you survive long enough with an NA mid laner if you're going to use your import slots in other ways? And so having that NA mid laner does have an inherent value, even if it's not going to result in the best mid laner in NA itself, right? So in my conversations with other people during the off season, though, it wasn't that people thought that Damonte was terrible or unworthy of being in the LCS. It's that people believed that his ceiling was low enough that they wanted to roll. They wanted to roll the dice. They wanted to roll the dice on other people that they thought could have a higher ceiling. So I would have said that, like, obviously it was unlikely that all of these people were rolling the dice on, of which Golden Glue was not one of them. So it's kind of weird that he ended up on this team.
Riomas of the world, of course, yes.
Yeah, the Akas, the Riomas, there are a bunch of other, ways that this could have gone, right? Even potentially Froggen or somebody like that. So I think that it makes sense in the spring, especially if you realize that there aren't any real consequences, if you're not challenging for a top slot to go to MSI already, to be like, hey, maybe we hit gold on one of these other pickups. I do think that it was always very likely that he was going to be playing in the summer, because the odds that everyone struck gold were going to be super low. So he was going to make a comeback regardless when people maybe reevaluated their teams or changed their minds. So it is nice to see him back. I do think he's good enough to be an LCS. I think he deserves to be there.
I also think Golden Guardians is one of the most logical teams to put him on. Like, he always worked well when he had Lyra as his jungler in the clutch team. Closer is the best player on this team, arguably. Why not put an aggressive mid laner with him? Makes perfect sense to me. That's what never made sense to me about having Golden Glue with Closer. Like, that doesn't really make any sense to me, having that solo lane setup. So at least this has a chance to do something. It's still not going to be a top team, let's be real, but there's some potential for upsets.
Well, it's potential for upsets, and also it's a good meta because Closer is the best player on this team, and we're going to carry jungle meta. Now, how he got Graves, I will never know. That seems like the first thing you banned against Golden Guardians coming into this split. They lost the Nidalee game, not because of Closer's Nidalee, which was fine, because, I don't think it's not that individual players can't play Nidalee. I just don't think that teams can play with Nidalee. They have the level of coordination or knowledge in order to make that pick work in NA right now. But Graves can just do Graves things on his own and doesn't require the same level of finesse that a Nidalee pickup does. But yeah, I don't even know why you would remotely give Golden Guardians that pick. That is insane to me. But they did it. So I don't know. I think there's a certain amount of upside because of the meta and because of the Damonte pickup for Golden Guardians. Still not in love. By the way, Ole is now a coach for Golden Guardians.
He's also buff as fuck. Just check out his Instagram. This guy's looking straight fire.
So one of the weirdest
compliments.
One of the weirdest things to me is what will happen in the future, because Ole was talking on Twitter and indeed thanked me. I wrote a letter for him for his green card. So whenever he gets his green card, like, he's going to be eligible for residency in NA. And like, is Ole the best support on that roster, on that team? Yes, he is. So like, that's at least something positive that could happen potentially in the future, even though green cards do take a long time to process, especially these days. But yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. There are obvious limitations with having Huki and and Keith as your supports.
I mean, that's what I was going to bring up too, right? Because I think like Closer can try to do a lot in the jungle role, and you upgrade mid lane, like that's going to be good too. But like for the first 8 minutes of the game, sure, like you can do jungle mid and style on people, but at the end of the day, you're going to need a good support if you want to start beating top teams. And you're going to need a support that can actually like join up with you and like get shit done. And unfortunately for Closer, I don't think he has the teammates to do it.
The thing I don't get though is, again, like obviously FBI is another player someone's gambled on there. Like, right, maybe because he's got good mechanics at times. I think it's debatable if you can't actually do it.
He played really bad this week.
I don't think you have them personally, but I get what people mean by he has good mechanics. So they wanted to gamble on him, thinking maybe he'll turn out to be really good. If he requires an import slot, get him out of there. Like, again, there's people who are NA AD carries I'd rather have over him. Like, what is Apollo chopped liver to you? Like, he's better than the fucking FBI, mate. Listen, he's not some super duper player, but he's not terrible. Like, I'd rather have him and then get a good support. Like, I don't know why you're wasting import slots on some of these players. Like, listen, I'm not flaming them. I am, but I'm doing it justifiably. All Oceanic players have been garbage thus far. Like, I need to... Actually, you know what? That reminds me, actually, Destiny had some all right moves actually this week. Actually, I'll give him some credit. He wasn't terrible, actually. But generally, those haven't been worth the imports, I'm afraid. They just haven't. Like, if everyone was gambling that they have a faker, so far, you've all just got an Oceanic golden glues. That to give you the analogy, you know.
I think, like, I do understand with the way that import slots are working now, that it was somewhat reasonable to, like, try and figure out if there were going to be...
Can we just say that as well? Wait a minute. This is how whack NA is. You put in place import rules to stop people recruiting 5 Korean players. Then you realize, like 1 year in, shit, if there's only 2 imports, we're going to be fucking garbage forever. Right, just start letting everyone abuse those rules so that eventually, like, people who are like NA players is like, Impact, fucking, like, is this a joke? Jensen. Like, what is even the point of import rules then? As far as I can tell, import rules, I'll just answer my own question, is just some really slimy way that Riot found to give a little extra boost to Cloud9, TSM, Team Liquid, the old kings who were there from day one, because then they obviously, like, ended the rules on it later on. So you can't just do it as a new squad and start building up your own little 5-man import team. No. Only those people who, for some specific period of years, had, like, enough players that were in that vague hinterland that they can just do it. Like, what's the point in it? You either should just go hard to imports, and they're real imports, unless they get a green card, which obviously legally would mean they'd have to be allowed to play, or you go no imports. It's one or the other, or all imports. It has to be one of the 3, basically. At the moment, this is a nightmare, this one at the moment, where, like, because what you're going to get, here's my prediction. I'll end the rant on this. You think it's good, right? Because in theory, if someone had done this 3 years ago, you could have made a lineup that was like TSM's lineup when they had the best team, but then 2 imports as well as like whoever else they had, right? You could have made like a 4 import team that was straight fire. Here's the problem. It will actually end up crippling NA that they have these fake imports that don't count as imports. Because what will happen is people who actually eventually end up washed up will stick around in LCS teams because they no longer count as an import.
Yes.
So suddenly, you're all laughing now. Froggen will be the best NA mid laner. That will just be who he is now. So he'll always have a career. All these players you all want out of LCS, who you think hold LCS now, they're the players who are going to get the spots. They just become the new Paul Belter at that point in time. They become the new fucking Hui. Like, it only works in the very short term. And basically, no one exploited it properly. Team Liquid's like the closest, basically.
See, and this is the thing is, the way NA GMing has to be done is you always have to plan around your import slots. No one else in the universe, like, look at LEC. Do you think they're sitting there being like, okay, we have to get these, it's very important that we have these, imports, and then we're going to build our residents around them. No, they start with the residents, and then they're like, okay, where do we need extra help? Like in NA, it's like, okay, I have to get a European or Korean mid laner or I'm screwed, right? And so it creates this whole wacky domino system for GMing in LCS, where it's like there are certain very valuable pieces that those dominoes have to fall, because that will determine who everyone else is getting, right? Like the fact that Impact is a resident is incredibly important to Team Liquid.
Of course.
Incredibly important. So, it's not like, let's get the best player that we can. It's like, let's get the best player that we can under this very specific set of circumstances. And even then the limited pool is just absolutely wrecking us. And I totally agree with Thorin that that's just how it's going to be in NA, is that the more of these residents, and you know what else is going to happen? is that even those new residents, those new NA players, if they're not good enough, they're just going to be taking up academy spots, and you're never going to have any level of ability to create new players in this region ever.
So it actually does the opposite of what they thought it would do, basically, unfortunately.
Yeah. I was just gonna like compare it to like how LEC does things, because I feel like each year we actually just have less and less imports. Like G2 used to have, you know, Korean top jungle. That's like been done away with now. And in the off season, granted, I'm less like ingrained with NA, so like most of the conversation, like I don't actually like hear like owners and like GMs talking and whatnot, but like the conversation I do hear is like, oh, what's the big LCK player? Like, oh, is Tarzan coming to NA this year? Like, oh, I'm so excited.
They always feel it that they're going to get the best players in the world.
Exactly.
Here is the parallel for you guys. Like, in the same way that we talked about how TSM talks this big game, but has just slowly faded into irrelevance, basically, yet we're still talking about them. This is LCS. They are just LCS in a nutshell, while this whole region just sort of like walks into the ocean. They're just out there just slowly walking into the sea. They don't even have production anymore. Like, the whole thing is just crap. Like, it's crap wrapped in crap. Like, the teams are crap, the games are crap, and the wrapping they put around them is also shit. I don't even know where you go right now. It's just everything. It's not even a shit sandwich. It's a shit sandwich with shit for buns.
It's also because it does cripple like being a GM, like we're saying, because there's not enough domestic talent to make like the right piece. Like, there's no shrewd choice, except for actually, funnily enough, Team Liquid didn't choose this, but players like Tactical, they're the gambles you could have gone with, but just people didn't. So instead, what you end up with is, it's like why they actually made salary cap rules in every American sport, because you want the talent to be spread out. You don't want one dominant team and then everyone else to be garbage. What you want is like 15 franchises that everyone can go and watch. And even if they're not the best team, hey, they've got a superstar player, like we've got an amazing defensive end, or we've got some super sick wide receiver. Like, in this scenario, the imports just became those players. So even the bad teams have like some super duper, like Closer plays on fucking Golden Guardians. Like, if you could have no import rules, like I'm sure TSM would just pick him up, or some other squad like that, you know. Like, in this scenario, it just makes it so that you have parity in the wrong way. You want parity where everyone's really good. You don't want parity where everyone's like equally bad. And then if Cloud9 happens to be the team that did the whole like import native player part the best, then they're untouchable because they have the mixture of imports and the domestic players. So anyways, at the end of this episode, I feel like we've done all the rants about LCS being bad. There's nothing left in the tank.
It's all out now.
I do want to talk about one more thing, because we did say we were going to talk about it and we didn't, which is LEC Super Weeks.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sure.
We did promise that, so I think we do.
I feel like I'm stuck in some sort of fucked up dream here, right? So first of all, everyone went back to best of ones. We all agreed best of ones weren't that good, and we're going to move on from them. We're back then. We're just trapped in the world where we now have to just believe best of ones is all there is, Thorin. Now we're even bringing Super Week backs, and people are cheering it on. I can't even believe people are cheering it on. The death of Super Weeks was one of the best things to ever happen.
Yanko said he wanted them until he played this week, and then he decided. I'm sure he decided now that he would rather not.
To be fair, he did also say they were going to go 18-0, so he was saying a lot of shit back then. It was just, you know, his trigger discipline wasn't great. I'm just saying, you know. What do you think, Ender? For a caster, it could be fun, I guess.
So, like, yes and no. So I think it was like actually exceptionally fun because of the situation, right? Like, we had to take 2 months off without MSI, and even the second half of LEC we were casting from our bedrooms. So I was just like pumped to get back to the studio, and I'm like, I will work 7 days in a row if you want me to. Like, I just want to be around human beings because that's nice. But I will say, when I rolled up to the studio for day 3, it was tough. It's just like one of those things you're like not used to, and combined with the fact that I just hadn't done it in a while, that it was kind of exhausting. And I think I got carried by the fact that like game 1 was like really boring. Me and Trevor both like looked at each other afterwards like, yeah, that kind of sucked. We need to like add the energy after that game. And then like the second game, I forget what it was, but it was like way closer and more fun. So it definitely helped things. But it's also so like there's a little bit of a drain on that third day, but also when it comes to like building the show, it's also much harder because the way that the shows usually work is that the Friday show, is the most prepared show by far, and that's like obvious, right?
Sure,
You already have the games ready to go, and you have an entire week to sort of build that out. As a freelancer now, we come in like one day to prepare, and like put the show together, and then for Saturday we have like an outline, but that gets all filled out on the Friday night, and those meetings are the hardest meetings because you've just worked for 10 hours and then you have an extra one on top of it. So the most difficult thing is having two of those, because then you have the Friday night meeting to build Saturday show and the Saturday night meeting to build the Sunday show. So I think having the 2 shows per week makes like the overall average level like quality of show go up. So in that way, I'm glad that we only have the one other super week at the end of the split week 8.
Question, Ender.
Yeah.
If there were no enchanter supports, would you have more energy?
So here's the thing is so a lot of my colleagues hate the current meta and the enchanter sports and stuff, and I have no doubt that in a few weeks I will be like tired of it, but I felt like for the last 2 years there's just been like a skill set in League that hasn't really been tested, and that's like the very drawn out team fights, where like tank positioning is actually important, and it's not just like 10 champions that are diving each other. So this is actually really interesting to me because I really enjoy team fights, and before it was like, let's pick 10 champions with like super high agency that all have the ability to like heavily impact fights, and now we're seeing more of a meta that is geared specifically around team play, specifically around team fights, and that's something that is like a new challenge, I feel, at least for teams.
Kaas, that's how you're winning games. How can you hate it?
Yeah.
Whoa. We played Senna+Wukong, right? Like, we tried to make it interesting.
What do you think, though, Kaas, as someone in the coaching staff, though? Because that's one of the angles as to why I wanted Super Weeks out, is that there's too many games to prepare for. Like, you can't
create too much variance
every game. Usually what ends up happening, is a spoiler for people who've never seen what LCS with Super Weeks is, here's how it goes. Obviously, you put all your prep time into the big teams that are really hard to beat. So what will inevitably happen is, every now and then, your third game or one of your games that's the least important opponent just gets a better chance of upsetting you because you can't put all your time into that game. Like, what do you think on your side? Are there upsides I'm not seeing to this?
I mean, we as Bad Lions, like, okay, so you have certain teams that prepare differently for certain weeks, right? Like, they will ban certain champions, they will draft differently. Obviously, it's week 1, so it's kind of hard. For us, because we play everything and we're very, like, adaptable, I think it's less of a problem, but I can see it being a problem for certain teams. But I think the coaching, like, it's especially the coaching staff puts like the same work in every gaming. Obviously, we prepare more for a best of 5, but like, I think we treated all the 3 games this weekend as the same.
Okay.
I will also say for the week 8 Super Week to close out the season, I think it does give the broadcast like more room from like a storytelling perspective, because usually coming into the last week, a lot of the standings are already going to be set in stone. Sure. So like the typical week 9s are going to be really hard to be like, let's get excited about Excel versus Schalke, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. Whereas suppose like even just adding the 1 extra game, like what that does for like the percentage odds of like, oh, this team isn't mathematically locked out of playoffs, gives our games at least a little bit more meaning, which could be interesting.
Yeah,
I think best of 1s are like the way to go, though. I don't think best of 3s would suit Europe. I think it would make it less interesting.
What about best of 2s?
No, because then you draw it. Then you draw it. It's giga boring. Like, how do you go to sleep?
Wait,
and you're
like, European. I thought you like ties.
Well,
that's still one of my all-time favorite quotes. Holy shit.
It's so good. Still gets mileage even in 2020.
I don't know. I would prefer it to best of 1s personally, but that's we're not allowed to have nice things in Western League of Legends, apparently. I mean, you can. I guess it's probably just a cost of production issue, guys. They don't want to roll with 4 or 5 days of production costs per week, so it's just never gonna happen.
You know what? I'll just say it like this. I just like the way that this is the way Riot's brain went. They were like, but when we went to best of 2s and best of 3s, people didn't like it that much. They were like, right, well, it can't be League of Legends, the game, that they don't like. It can't be our broadcast that they don't like. It can't be the quality of the players they don't like. Must be the fucking format. So they just changed the format. Like, it's so perfect. It's a move that Riot would do. I want it to just stay like that. I want it to be like some amazing fucking mistake that's just forever put into amber for all of history, so that in like 1,000 years, someone goes, "Why did they not invented best of threes back then?" Oh no, best of threes have been invented for like decades. But have you ever heard of Riot Games? Let me tell you the tale of Riot Games. Like, not be like that fucking prequel meme that I was trying to reference.
All right. Well, I've said my piece on Super Weeks. I think they create too much variance. I think it requires too much preparation. I think it creates trap games. Personally, what I like to see in any esport is teams being prepared, showing their best strategies, not being tired, giving me the best gameplay, showing adaptation, which is why I like best of threes. I don't get anything from this. But that said, well played to Mad Lions for their extremely smart, we'll do everything on red side this week, which actually, no, seriously, kudos. If you have to play 3 games and you can't prep for all of them, you might as well do what you guys did, which is try and create as many consistencies across these games as you can, and then come with some unorthodox strats to bait your opponent into playing the way you want to. Because here's the smart thing you guys did. You said, here, have some Varus, so you know how all of your opponents are going to play, and then you just create a variety of red side counter strats to beat them all, since you're basically forcing them all to play the same style. That was really smart. So, good job.
I wondered why no one actually third banned Varus on blue side. And then they would get flamed by Reddit. Why you banned Varus third?
Yeah.
Like
it was actually
situation.
You guys losing to G2 made them go, "Oh yes, this is the perfect pick to run against Valkyrie."
That was some Giga Brain shit. I do give you guys mad credit. That's why I wanted to get you on the show this week, because I thought it was so cool. So congrats on
Thanks
that.
for having me.
You guys had the good Super Week strat. As a reminder, if you guys are watching this, we are on the Insight on Esports Twitch channel and the Insight on Esports YouTube channel. So follow there, subscribe there if you hadn't already. This will be where it is from now on. If you're listening to the podcast, it's in the same space. Nothing's changed at all. You can also look on our Twitter. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming on the show. We will see you next week, next Monday, for not talking about TSM summoning Insight.